I sat next to the catering dumpsters at my sister's luxury wedding holding a black velvet envelope. Inside that envelope was a $10 million bridge loan contract, the only thing keeping her new tech billionaire husband out of federal prison on Monday morning. When she walked over in her custom gown, smirked, and told me I was a worthless embarrassment who did not belong near her important guests, I did not cry. I simply smiled, stood up, took my envelope, and walked to my chauffeured car. Minutes later, the sheer panic that erupted in the bridal suite was absolute music to my ears. My sister Sienna stood over my flimsy plastic table, pointing a manicured finger toward the far edge of the manicured lawn. The smell of rotting seafood appetizers was already wafting over in the humid summer heat. Around us, the Washington elite and Silicon Valley investors were sipping champagne, completely oblivious to the humiliation happening in the corner of the patio. Sienna adjusted the 2-carat diamond necklace her groom had bought her and sneered. "I do not care if you are my sister Maya. This section is for Preston family investors and people who actually matter. I cannot have my single struggling sister taking up a seat at the VIP table looking like that." She gestured up and down at my vintage designer gown. To Sienna, if a dress did not have a giant tacky logo plastered across the chest, it meant I was broke. "Just sit down, eat your free meal, and do not embarrass me tonight," she demanded. "My name is Maya. I am 33 years old, and for my entire life, I have been the shadow to my sister Blinding Light. If you have ever been the scapegoat in your family, the one whose achievements are ignored, while the golden child is praised for just breathing, hit that like button and subscribe. You are going to want to hear exactly how I made her regret this moment before they even cut the wedding cake. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from and if you have ever had to cut off toxic relatives." I looked up at Sienna. 22 years of memories flashed through my mind. My parents skipping my college graduation because Sienna had a minor modeling gig. My mother draining the savings account I built from my first job to buy Sienna a luxury car because she needed to keep up appearances. Every single family holiday was spent making sure Sienna felt like the absolute center of the universe, while I was treated like an inconvenient afterthought who was only tolerated if I kept quiet and paid for dinner. My father constantly told me that I needed to be more like her, more refined, more elegant, more willing to date wealthy men, instead of wasting my time building my silly little businesses in my small college dorm room. I did not yell. I did not cause a scene. I just calmly reached into my clutch and pulled out the thick black velvet envelope I had brought with me. It was heavy and sealed with a gold wax stamp. Sienna rolled her eyes heavily. "What is that? Please do not tell me you wrote me a poem. Or is it a gift card to a grocery store? Keep your little $100, Maya. Preston makes that in his sleep." "You are right," I said. My voice dropped to a terrifying calm. I stood up, smoothing the front of my silk dress. I definitely do not belong at this table. And frankly, neither does my gift. I turned around, gripping the velvet envelope, and began walking toward the valet stand. "Excuse me, where are you going?" Sienna hissed. She was careful not to raise her voice too loud and ruin her perfect aesthetic. "You are leaving before the toasts. Mom is going to kill you." "Tell Mom I said congratulations," I called back over my shoulder, not breaking my stride. What Sienna did not know, what nobody in that toxic family knew, was that I was not just Maya, the struggling sister. I was the founder and chief executive officer of Apex Holdings, a private equity firm managing over $3 billion in assets. And that black velvet envelope did not hold a grocery store gift card. It held a signed $10 million emergency bridge loan contract. For the last 3 weeks, her brand new hotshot husband, Preston Sterling, had been secretly crying in my firm lobby, begging my assistance for a meeting with the anonymous boss of Apex. His startup was a complete fraud. He was drowning in massive debt, and the Securities and Exchange Commission was going to raid his corporate offices by Monday if he did not secure funding to cover up his missing capital. I had decided to save him, not for him but for Sienna, because despite everything, she was my sister and I did not want to see her husband go to federal prison on their honeymoon. I had told Preston lawyers that a representative from Apex would drop the signed contract off at the wedding. But as I handed the valet my ticket and slid into the back of my Maybach, I looked at the black envelope in my hands. The gold wax seal was completely unbroken. "You want me by the trash," I thought to myself, tapping the envelope against my chin. "Fine. Let us see how you like the garbage when your husband's bank accounts are frozen and his assets are seized." I rolled down the tinted window just in time to see Sienna laughing and sipping her champagne. She truly thought she had finally put me in my place. She thought she had won. I pulled out my phone and dialed my chief operating officer. He answered on the second ring. "Cancel the sterling wire transfer," I said into the receiver. "All of it. Let him burn." The heavy doors of the Maybach sealed out the sounds of the string quartet and the clinking glasses as my driver merged onto the highway. I leaned back against the leather seat, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over me. I had not even been on the road for 10 minutes when my phone started vibrating violently against the center console. I glanced down at the screen. It was my mother, Helen. I took a deep breath and hit accept. I did not even get a chance to say hello before her voice shrieked through the speakers so loud my driver actually flinched. "Are you out of your mind?" she screamed. "Sienna is in the bridal suite crying her eyes out. You walked out of your own sister luxury wedding because you were too arrogant to sit where you were told." "I was placed next to a garbage dumpster, Mom," I replied, keeping my tone completely deadpan. "I am not a stray dog. I am not eating my dinner next to discarded crab cakes." Her voice dripped with the familiar venom I had known since childhood. "It is always about you, is it not, Maya? Always playing the victim. Sienna's new family is incredibly wealthy. They are highly connected people. Preston parents flew in from Nantucket and you are over here throwing a massive tantrum because you did not get a prime seat. You are jealous. You have always been jealous of her success." I stared out the tinted window, watching the city lights blur past. The irony was suffocating. My mother was defending a man who was 48 hours away from being indicted for wire fraud. If Sienna stole my clothes as a teenager, I was called selfish for wanting them back. If Sienna failed a college class, it was my fault for not tutoring her well enough. "I am not jealous, Helen," I said, dropping the mom title entirely. "I am protecting my peace. Enjoy the wedding." I ended the call before she could scream another word and immediately blocked her number. I took a slow, calming sip of the chilled, sparkling water from the luxury car mini-fridge. Let them enjoy their fancy crab cakes. Meanwhile, back at the country club, the real disaster was just beginning to unfold. While my mother was busy screaming at me over a seating chart, Preston Sterling was having a full-blown panic attack in the groom suite. He was pacing back and forth, yanking at his expensive silk bow tie. His face was pale and covered in a thick layer of sweat. His phone was pressed hard against his ear as he frantically spoke to his chief financial officer. "What do you mean she came and left?" Preston barked into the phone. "You told me the Apex representative was going to put the envelope on the gift table. I have been staring at that table for an entire hour. There is nothing there but toaster ovens and crystal bowls." "I do not know what to tell you, Preston," the chief financial officer replied, his voice trembling through the phone speaker. "The executive assistant at Apex just emailed me. She said their representative arrived, assessed the situation, decided we were not a good cultural fit, and departed with the contract. The deal is completely dead, Preston." Apex pulled out. Preston's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of a heavy mahogany dresser to stop himself from collapsing onto the floor. "No, they cannot pull out. If we do not have that 10 million by Monday morning, the Securities and Exchange Commission is going to audit the escrow accounts. I will go to federal prison." Did they say who the representative was? Did anyone see her? The email just said it was a black woman wearing a vintage teal designer gown, the financial officer replied. She was holding a thick black velvet envelope with a gold wax seal. Preston froze. The remaining blood drained completely from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost. A black woman, a teal gown, a black envelope. He burst out of the groom suite and sprinted down the hallway. He shoved past a group of waiters and burst into the bridal suite where Sienna was reapplying her expensive lip gloss surrounded by her bridesmaids. Where is she? Preston yelled, his voice cracking with pure hysteria. Sienna jumped, dropping her lipstick onto the carpet. Preston, baby, what is wrong? You are sweating all over your tuxedo. Your sister Maya, he shouted, grabbing Sienna by the shoulders. Where did she go? She was wearing a teal dress, right? Did she have a black envelope with her? Sienna scoffed, rolling her eyes and gently pushing his hands away. Do not let Maya ruin our perfect night, babe. Yes, she had some stupid black envelope. She tried to act like it was some grand gift, but I told her to keep her cheap little $100 check and sit by the catering tents. She got offended and left like a brat. Good riddance. For a full 10 seconds, there was absolute dead silence in the room. The bridesmaids shifted uncomfortably, looking away. Preston stared at his beautiful, arrogant new wife. His left eye was twitching violently. You did what he whispered, the sound barely escaping his dry throat. I told her to leave, Sienna repeated, crossing her arms defensively. Preston, she is poor. She does not fit in with your wealthy investor friends. I was protecting our brand. Protecting our brand. Preston suddenly screamed, kicking a velvet ottoman so hard it crashed into the vanity mirror, shattering the glass into 1,000 pieces. The bridesmaids shrieked and scattered toward the door. That poor sister of yours is the chief executive officer of Apex Holdings. That cheap little envelope had a $10 million bridge loan inside it. It was the only thing keeping me out of prison, and you told her to sit by the trash. Sienna's jaw dropped open. That is impossible, she stammered, taking a step back until she hit the vanity table. Maya runs a small consulting firm. She lives in a regular apartment in New York. She does not even own a private jet, Preston. Billionaires do not let their families treat them like garbage for their entire lives. Preston let out a hollow, hysterical laugh that sounded almost unhinged. She does not need a private jet to ruin me, Sienna. She owns the company that owns the bank that holds my entire corporate payroll. Apex Holdings is a ghost firm. They buy up distressed assets and liquidate them. They are ruthless. I have been begging their executives for a lifeline for a month. And you just threw their chief executive officer out like she was the trash. At that exact moment, the heavy double doors to the bridal suite swung open. My mother Helen and my father Richard stepped into the room. They had heard the shattering glass from the hallway. My mother's face contorted in anger when she saw the broken mirror, the scattered bridesmaids, and Preston's disheveled appearance. What on earth is going on in here? Helen demanded, crossing her arms. Preston, why are you screaming at my daughter on her wedding day? The guests are starting to ask questions outside. You need to fix your bow tie and get back out there immediately. We have a reputation to maintain in this city. Preston turned his wild, desperate eyes toward my parents. The respectful, charming son-in-law facade he had maintained for 2 years completely evaporated. Your daughter just signed my death warrant, Helen. Both of your daughters did. My father stepped forward, puffing out his chest to look intimidating. Watch your tone, Preston. You are speaking to my family. What are you talking about? I am talking about Maya. Preston yelled, pointing a shaking finger at the empty doorway. The daughter you two have been bad-mouthing all night. The one you shoved to the back of the patio next to the dumpsters. Do you have any idea who she actually is? Do you know what she does for a living? She is a glorified accountant, my mother scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. She has always been deeply insecure about Sienna's success. We already dealt with her little tantrum. I called her while she was driving away and put her in her place. She is probably crying in her cheap hotel room right now, realizing how badly she messed up. Preston looked at my mother as if she had completely lost her mind. A cheap hotel room. Helen, she is staying at the penthouse suite of the Four Seasons. She bought out the entire top floor for her private security team. She is the founder of Apex Holdings. She is worth over $3 billion. My parents froze. The room became so quiet you could hear the distant bass of the wedding disc jockey playing outside on the lawn. My father blinked rapidly, his mind struggling to process the sheer weight of that information. Apex Holdings. My father repeated, his voice dropping to a whisper. The firm that was featured on the cover of the Wall Street Journal last week. That is ridiculous. Maya would have told us if she had that kind of money. We are her parents. Why would she tell you? Preston snapped, pacing the room like a caged animal. So you could drain her bank accounts to buy Sienna more designer clothes. I saw the loan contract she brought with my own eyes. The valet told my assistant he saw her holding it. It had the official Apex watermark. It was signed by Maya. She was the anonymous backer who was going to save my tech company from bankruptcy. And now she is gone. Sienna finally found her voice, her hands trembling as she grabbed Preston's arm. Bankruptcy. Preston, what are you talking about? Your company is valued at $400 million. We are about to buy a massive mansion in the Hamptons. You promised me we were going to Paris for a month. Preston ripped his arm away from her grasp, looking at her with pure disgust. It is fake, Sienna. All of it is fake. The investor funds are completely gone. The software prototype failed 6 months ago and I covered it up. I cooked the books to keep the board of directors quiet while I looked for a secret bailout. The Securities and Exchange Commission found out. They are raiding my corporate office on Monday morning at 8 o'clock. My mother let out a loud, dramatic gasp, clutching her chest. The federal government. Preston, are you saying you are a criminal? You lied to us. You told us you were a visionary. I was trying to survive, Preston roared, turning red in the face. And Maya was going to give me the $10 million I needed to cover the missing funds. She was going to save all of us. But because you people treat her like dirt, she took the money and left. Do you understand what this means, Sienna? We do not have a prenuptial agreement. You refused to sign one because you thought I was loaded. When the federal agents freeze my assets on Monday, they are going to freeze yours too. They will take that diamond wedding ring right off your finger. Sienna looked down at her massive diamond ring as if it had suddenly caught fire. The arrogant smirk she had worn all day was completely erased. It was replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. The golden child was finally realizing that her entire perfect life was built on a foundation of lies and stolen money. Her status, her wealth, her superior attitude, it was all about to vanish. Call her? My father, barked, his voice cracking with sheer panic. He turned to Sienna, pushing her toward her purse. Call your sister right now. Apologize to her. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. Tell her you were just stressed about the wedding planning and took it out on her. Do whatever you have to do to get her back here with that envelope. I cannot, Sienna whimpered, tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face, ruining her expensive makeup. I told her to sit by the dumpsters. I told her she was a broke embarrassment to the family. She is not going to answer me. She hates me. Then keep calling until she does. Preston screamed, shoving Sienna's phone directly into her hands. If she does not wire that money by tomorrow morning, we are entirely finished. I am going to prison, and you are going to be working at a grocery store to pay off my legal fees. Call her. Sienna's hands shook so violently she dropped her phone onto the plush carpet. She scrambled to pick it up, her manicured nails catching on the fabric. She frantically dialed my number and put it on speakerphone so everyone in the room could hear. The dial tone echoed loudly in the tense, heavy silence of the bridal suite. Ring, ring, ring. Back in my hotel suite, I had just kicked off my heels and poured myself a generous glass of Cabernet. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the glittering city skyline. I was no longer the frightened little girl trying to please a mother who never loved her. I was the architect of my own empire. I looked down at my phone resting on the marble counter. The screen lit up brightly with Sienna's name. I smiled, taking a slow sip of my wine. I let it ring 5 times, listening to their desperation echoing through the silent airwaves. Then I reached out and hit the red button, sending the golden child straight to voicemail. Sienna called back immediately. I let it ring 3 more times before finally answering. Maya, her voice was high-pitched and breathless, completely devoid of the haughty arrogance she had displayed just an hour ago. Maya, thank goodness you picked up. Where are you? I am at my Hotel Sienna, I replied, swirling the dark red wine in my glass. I told you I left. You made it very clear I was not welcome at your VIP event. I am just giving you exactly what you wanted. Listen, Maya, there was a huge misunderstanding. Sienna stammered, her words tumbling over each other in a frantic rush. The seating chart was messed up. The wedding planner made a terrible mistake. You know I would never put you next to the trash. You are my sister. The wedding planner. I echoed, my voice dripping with cold amusement. The wedding planner pointed at me and told me to keep my cheap $100 check. That is remarkable dedication to her job. Maya, please, Sienna practically sobbed through the phone. I am sorry, okay. I am so sorry. You need to come back, right now. We need you to bring the envelope back. The envelope, I asked, feigning innocent confusion. Why on earth do you want my cheap little $100 gift card, Sienna? Preston makes that much money in his sleep, remember? It is not a gift card, Maya, and you know it. Sienna's voice cracked, completely breaking her polished facade. Preston told me everything. He said the envelope you brought belongs to him. It is confidential business property for his company. You made a huge mistake taking it when you left. You need to return his property immediately before he gets his lawyers involved. I let out a sharp, genuine laugh that echoed in the quiet hotel room. The audacity of this family was truly boundless. Even when they were drowning, they still tried to act like they were the ones driving the boat. His lawyers, I repeated, walking over to my king-sized bed, where the black velvet envelope rested against the pillows. Sienna, your husband cannot afford to hire a paralegal right now, let alone a team of corporate lawyers. And he certainly does not own this document. I do. Maya, stop playing games, Sienna shrieked, the panic fully overtaking her. Preston said that envelope has the financial documents he needs for his board meeting on Monday. You have no right to take it. Bring it back to the country club right now. Mom and Dad are furious. I picked up the heavy black envelope and broke the gold wax seal. I slid the thick stack of legal documents out, unfolding them on the bed. Let me clarify something for you, Sienna, I said, my voice dropping to a hard, authoritative tone. I am not some confused wedding guest who accidentally walked away with Preston Mail. I am the sole lender listed on this contract. My firm Apex Holdings drafted this document. So before you start threatening me with imaginary lawyers, why do not I read to you exactly what this property actually says? No, Maya, do not, Sienna started, but I cut her off. I held the first page up to the light. Let us see here. Page 1, Section 3. The borrower. Preston Sterling acknowledges that Sterling Technologies has falsified revenue reports for the past 4 consecutive quarters, resulting in a capital deficit of $12 million. Maya, stop it, Sienna cried out. I flipped to the next page, ignoring her completely. Page 2, Section 5. The borrower admits that investor capital was illegally diverted into personal offshore accounts to fund the purchase of luxury assets, including but not limited to a $2 million residential property in the Hamptons and a customized 2-carat diamond engagement ring. Oh my God, Sienna whispered, the sound barely audible. That was the ring she had shoved in my face all year. The ring she claimed was proof that she had finally secured a man infinitely better than anyone I could ever attract. It was bought with stolen money. It gets better, Sienna. I continued, flipping to the final page. Page 4, Section 9. The borrower agrees to surrender all personal assets to Apex Holdings in the event of default, including the marital residence vehicles and any joint bank accounts held with his spouse. I paused, letting the heavy silence stretch across the phone line. Did you hear that last part, little sister? I asked softly. Your husband is not a tech genius. He is a fraud who stole millions of dollars from very angry rich people, and he was so desperate to avoid federal prison that he was willing to sign away everything you own to my company to get a bailout. That envelope you called a cheap piece of trash was the only thing standing between you and absolute financial ruin. Preston's voice suddenly boomed through the speakerphone, confirming he had been listening the entire time. Maya, listen to me. You cannot do this. We had a verbal agreement. Your team said the funds were approved. You cannot back out now because of a petty sibling rivalry. Petty sibling rivalry? I repeated, my voice turning to ice. You think this is about a seating chart, Preston? This is about respect. You spent the last month begging me for a lifeline while sitting at my parents' dining table laughing at my expense. You let your wife humiliate me in front of hundreds of people. You thought you could take my money in secret while treating me like dirt in public. Maya, please. Preston begged, his voice cracking. I will do whatever you want. I will give you more equity. I will step down as chief executive officer. Just wire the money. If the Securities and Exchange Commission walks into my office on Monday, I am dead. I looked at the contract on my bed, the contract that would have saved them both. I had worked 18-hour days for a decade to build my empire. I had sacrificed relationships, sleep, and my own peace of mind to accumulate the wealth I now commanded. And they expected me to just hand it over to a man who had stood by while his wife treated me like a stray dog. My chief operating officer already canceled the wire transfer, Preston, I said coldly. The money is gone. The deal is dead. No. Preston screamed, a visceral sound of pure terror. Maya, you cannot. You should have told your wife to be nicer to the help, Preston, I said. Enjoy your honeymoon. I hung up the phone and tossed it onto the bed. I did not block Sienna's number this time. I wanted to see exactly how desperate they would get. I walked back over to the window, looking down at the city streets below. For the first time in my 33 years of life, I did not feel the crushing weight of my family expectations. I did not feel the need to shrink myself to make Sienna look bigger. I felt light. I felt powerful. But I knew my family. They were not going to just accept defeat. They were relentless when it came to protecting their image. The phone calls were just the beginning. The real storm was coming, and I was ready for it. I walked over to the mahogany desk sitting in the corner of the hotel suite and opened my laptop. The screen illuminated the dark room, casting a cold blue glow across my face. I opened my secure business email client and pulled up the contact list for the board of directors of Sterling Technologies. These were serious men and women who had invested millions of their own personal wealth into Preston flashy tech startup. They had been kept completely in the dark about the missing funds and the falsified revenue reports. Preston had convinced them that the $10 million bridge loan from Apex Holdings was just meant to fund a new marketing expansion. I typed out the subject line with deliberate precision. Official notice of loan cancellation and withdrawal of funding. I attached the formal legal document my legal team had drafted earlier that week. In the body of the email, I kept it completely professional and brutally brief. To the board of directors of Sterling Technologies, please be advised that Apex Holdings is officially withdrawing our offer for the $10 million bridge loan effective immediately. During our final cultural audit, we discovered severe discrepancies regarding the character and integrity of your chief executive officer, Preston Sterling. Consequently, we no longer view Sterling Technologies as a viable or trustworthy investment. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Signed, Maya, Chief Executive Officer of Apex Holdings. My finger hovered over the send button. For a fraction of a second, a small pathetic voice in the back of my head whispered that I was destroying my own sister life. But that voice was quickly silenced by a rush of crystal-clear memory. I remembered a rainy Tuesday afternoon exactly 2 years ago. We were sitting in a high-end luxury leasing office in downtown Manhattan. Sienna was crying her eyes out because her credit score was too low to secure the gorgeous penthouse apartment she desperately wanted. She had no job, no savings, and absolutely no prospects. I had quietly pulled out my black card, paid the $50,000 deposit, and co-signed the entire lease so she would not be homeless. She had hugged me tightly, promising she would pay me back every single cent. Less than a month later, she met Preston. He had pulled up to her new apartment in a rented Porsche, wearing a vintage Rolex and talking loudly about his brand new tech startup. Suddenly, I was no longer the sister who kept a beautiful roof over her head. I was a complete embarrassment. I vividly remembered the exact moment she cast me aside like absolute garbage. We were supposed to have dinner to celebrate my 30th birthday. I had worked a 14-hour shift at my firm and rushed to the restaurant wearing a simple gray business suit. Sienna was already seated at the table, but when I walked up, she looked at me with sheer, unadulterated panic. She quickly stood up and pushed me aggressively back toward the crowded lobby. Maya, you cannot be here right now, she had whispered, looking nervously over her shoulder. Preston is bringing his investor friends here to celebrate his new massive funding round. They are extremely high society people, and you look like a tired, poor office clerk. It ruins my entire aesthetic. I need them to think I come from old money. Here is $20, take a cab home, and we will do your birthday another time. She had shoved a crumpled $20 bill into my hand and practically shoved me out the back door of the restaurant into the freezing, pouring rain. She never paid me back for the expensive apartment deposit. She never rescheduled my milestone birthday dinner. From that night on, she completely morphed into Preston perfect high society accessory, treating me like a dirty secret she had to hide from her wealthy new circle. She gladly took my money, while actively scrubbing me from her glamorous new reality. The memory faded, leaving nothing but cold, hard resolve. I pressed my finger down firmly on the smooth trackpad. Send. The email vanished from my outbox with a soft, satisfying swoosh sound. It was completely done. There was no turning back now. The massive dominoes had officially been tipped over. Less than 2 minutes later, my phone rang loudly. It was my chief operating officer, David. He was one of the few people who knew the full ugly extent of my family toxic dynamics. It is done, I said, calmly answering the phone. The board of directors has been officially notified. David let out a long, low whistle. I just saw the blind copy hit my inbox, Maya. You did not just pull the financial plug, you dropped a nuclear bomb right on his lap. Half of that board of directors will be calling their corporate lawyers before midnight to freeze Preston out of his own company. He will be removed as chief executive officer by tomorrow morning, and the federal agents will aggressively handle the rest. Are you okay? I am completely fine, David, I replied gently, closing my silver laptop. Honestly, I have never felt better in my entire life. Get some rest, Maya, David said warmly. You have a huge acquisition meeting on Tuesday. Do not let this drama drain your energy. I will see you Monday, David. Have a good weekend. I hung up the phone and walked into the marble bathroom. I turned on the sink, splashing cold water onto my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The vintage teal gown I wore was completely flawless. My hair was perfectly styled. I did not look like a tired clerk. I looked like a billionaire executing a takeover. I smiled, turning off the cold water. Suddenly, my phone buzzed brightly from the bedroom. I walked over there and picked it right up. It was a text message from my private security team downstairs. I unlocked the screen and read the brief message from my head of security. Miss Maya, your family has just entered the lobby. They are demanding to see you and are causing quite a disturbance with the front desk staff. Please advise on how you would like us to proceed. I let out a long sigh. Of course they were here. My parents never could handle being ignored, and Sienna certainly was not going to let $10 million slip through her fingers without throwing a massive public tantrum. I quickly typed my response. Do not throw them out yet. Let them wait by the elevators. I will be right down. I smoothed out the front of my teal dress, slipped my heels back on, and grabbed the empty black velvet envelope from the bed. I walked out of my penthouse suite and stepped into the private elevator, watching the floor numbers drop rapidly toward the ground level. The soft ding of the elevator arriving at the lobby felt like the bell ringing at the start of a heavyweight boxing match. The doors slid open, revealing a scene that was both incredibly pathetic and entirely predictable. My entire family was standing aggressively in front of the marble reception desk. Sienna was still wearing her massive custom Vera Wang wedding gown, the heavy train dragging across the pristine hotel floor, looking completely absurd outside of a banquet hall. Preston was standing next to her, his expensive tuxedo jacket entirely wrinkled, his bow tie hanging loosely around his neck, and his face flushed red with sheer panic. My parents, Helen and Richard, flanked them, looking furious and deeply embarrassed by the scene they were causing in a 5-star luxury establishment. The moment my mother spotted me stepping out of the elevator, her eyes narrowed into sharp slits, and she marched directly toward me, her designer heels clicking loudly against the polished marble. Maya, what on earth is wrong with you? She hissed, grabbing my arm tightly before I could even say a word. How dare you ignore our phone calls? How dare you run off and hide in this hotel after ruining your sister's special day? Give Preston his property back right now before he calls the police and has you arrested for grand theft. I looked down at her hand gripping my arm and calmly forcefully peeled her fingers off my skin. Do not touch me, Helen, I said, my voice low and dangerously cold. And I strongly suggest you lower your voice. You are making a massive scene in front of my staff. The hotel general manager, who was standing nervously behind the reception desk, gave me a quick, respectful nod, acknowledging my authority. My father stepped forward, puffing his chest out, in that familiar, intimidating posture he always used to try and bend me to his will. Do not speak to your mother that way, Maya, he barked loudly, drawing the attention of several wealthy hotel guests sitting in the nearby lounge area. You have completely lost your mind tonight. You walk out of the wedding, you steal Preston confidential business documents, and you refuse to answer your phone. We did not raise you to be a thief. Hand over the envelope immediately. We are taking it back to the country club, and you are going to apologize to Preston and Sienna for this ridiculous childish stunt. Sienna pushed past our parents, her eyes red and puffy from crying, her makeup slightly smeared. Maya, please, she begged, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. You are ruining my life. Just give him the envelope. It does not belong to you. He needs it for his company. You are just trying to sabotage my happiness because you are miserable and alone. I looked at the four of them standing there, completely united in their delusion. They truly believed that if they yelled loud enough, if they bullied me hard enough, I would simply fold and give them whatever they wanted, just like I had done my entire life. They did not understand that the girl who used to crave their approval was completely dead. I held up the empty black velvet envelope. Is this what you are all screaming about? I asked, casually flipping it between my fingers. Preston's eyes locked onto the black fabric like a starving dog looking at a piece of raw meat. He lunged forward, reaching for it, but my security guard, who had been standing discreetly near the elevator, immediately stepped between us, placing a firm hand on Preston's chest and shoving him back. Do not touch her, sir, the guard warned, his voice deep and menacing. Preston stumbled back, looking shocked that anyone would dare put their hands on him. He looked at me, his eyes wild with panic. Maya, tell your goon to back off, he demanded, adjusting his wrinkled jacket. Give me the contract. You read it to Sienna on the phone. I know you still have it. We had a deal. Apex Holdings agreed to fund the loan. You cannot back out now. I opened the flap of the black envelope and turned it upside down. Nothing fell out. It was completely empty. I left the contract upstairs. Preston, I said smoothly, crossing my arms. And we never had a deal. My firm offered you a lifeline based on fraudulent information you provided to my underwriters. You lied about your revenue, you lied about your stolen investor capital, and you lied about your impending federal indictment. The moment I realized you were a criminal, the deal was entirely dead. My mother let out a loud, dramatic scoff, waving her hand dismissively. Oh, please, Maya, stop being so dramatic. Preston is a brilliant tech entrepreneur. He is not a criminal. He just ran into some minor cash flow issues with his startup. Every successful businessman goes through rough patches. You are just using this as an excuse to humiliate Sienna because you have always been violently jealous of her relationships. My father nodded in agreement, his face red with anger. Your mother is right. You are twisting the truth to make yourself look like the victim again. Preston explained everything to us in the car ride over here. He told us how you have been stalking his company, trying to steal his proprietary software secrets. He told us that you stole that envelope to try and leverage a position on his board of directors. You are a manipulative, vindictive girl, Maya, and we are thoroughly disgusted with you. I stood there completely stunned by the sheer audacity of the lie Preston had just fed my parents. He had actually convinced them that I was a corporate spy trying to steal his worthless, failing company. And the worst part was, my parents believed him instantly. They believed the white man they had known for 2 years over their own black daughter they had known for 33. I stood there staring at the four of them in the lavish hotel lobby. The sheer absurdity of the situation almost made me laugh. Preston was actually wiping a fake tear from the corner of his eye. He looked down at the marble floor, playing the part of the wounded visionary perfectly. He sniffled, adjusting his collar, and looked at my parents with the eyes of a kicked puppy. I trusted her. Helen, he whispered, his voice trembling with perfectly manufactured grief. I invited her into my inner circle because she is family. I thought we were building a legacy together for Sienna. But she used her low-level contacts to try and lock me out of my own company servers. She wants to steal my life work and sell it to the highest bidder. My mother let out a soft, cooing sound of sympathy and actually reached out to rub Preston's arm. She looked at me with an expression of pure disgust, as if I were a stranger who had just broken into her home. I am so sorry, Preston, she murmured gently to him before turning her venom back on me. How could you stoop this low, Maya? We gave you everything. We sent you to the best schools, and you repay us by trying to ruin your brother-in-law on his wedding night. You are a disgrace to the Sterling family name and to ours. I did not take a single step back. I kept my posture perfectly straight. You are taking his word over mine, I asked, my voice dangerously calm. You are going to stand here and believe a man you met 24 months ago. A man who cannot even explain what his software actually does when you ask him at dinner. You are going to believe him over your own flesh and blood. My father stepped closer into my personal space, trying to use his height to intimidate me. Do not play the victim card with us, Maya, he growled, pointing a thick finger at my face. Preston is a brilliant innovator. He has investors from Silicon Valley. People respect him. Who respects you? You sit in a little office pushing papers around. You saw a chance to steal his success, and you took it because you are deeply bitter that your sister married a billionaire, and you are still entirely alone. The racial and social dynamics of the moment were so brutally obvious, I could barely stomach it. For my parents, Preston was the ultimate prize. He was the wealthy white tech genius who elevated their social status in the affluent Black community of Atlanta. He was their ticket to country club bragging rights and Hampton vacations. They were so desperate to protect his perceived wealth and whiteness that they were willing to throw their own daughter directly under the bus without a single shred of evidence. Sienna stepped out from behind Preston, her heavy wedding dress rustling against the floor. She pointed an accusing finger at my face, her eyes practically bulging with anger. You have always tried to destroy anything good that happens to me, Maya, she yelled, not caring that the hotel receptionist was watching us with wide eyes. You tried to ruin my college graduation. You tried to ruin my bridal shower. And now you are trying to steal my husband company because no man will ever love you enough to build an empire for you. I looked at my sister. The delusion was so deeply embedded in her brain that it was actually tragic. Sienna, I funded your entire life before you met him, I said quietly. I paid the rent for your luxury apartment. I bought your clothes. I paid for the very designer purse you are holding right now. That was just basic family duty, Sienna snapped back, tossing her hair. You had extra money and you owed it to me. But this is different. This is grand larceny. Preston said if you do not hand over the envelope and the proprietary codes, he is going to call the police. My father crossed his arms, his face turning a dark shade of crimson. We are not just going to let him call the police, Maya. If you do not give Preston exactly what he wants right now, I will personally make sure your reputation in this city is entirely destroyed. I will call every single business contact I have. I will call the country club board. I will tell everyone that you are a petty, jealous thief who tried to extort her own family. Your little consulting business will be completely bankrupt by the end of the month. You will never work in this town again. They were actually threatening to destroy my livelihood to protect a man who had already stolen millions. They were ready to burn my entire life to the ground just to keep the golden child perfectly happy. The gaslighting was so intense, so suffocating that for a brief, terrifying second I wondered if I was the crazy one. But then I remembered the heavy black envelope upstairs. I remembered the official documents from the Securities and Exchange Commission. I remembered exactly who I was. You are going to destroy my reputation, I asked, tilting my head slightly. You are going to call your friends at the country club and tell them I am a thief. Try me? My father threatened, his voice a low, aggressive rumble. Give him the documents, Maya. Now. Preston stood slightly behind my father, a smug, arrogant smile creeping onto his face. He truly believed he had won. He thought his white tears and his fake victim routine had successfully manipulated my parents into doing his dirty work. He thought I was just a weak, lonely woman who would eventually break under the pressure of her toxic family. He thought he could outsmart the chief executive officer of the very firm that held his entire pathetic life in the palm of its hand. I took a deep breath, letting the cool air of the luxury hotel lobby fill my lungs. I looked at Preston's smug face, then at my sister's furious glare, and finally at my parents' deeply disappointed eyes. They had dug their own graves tonight. They had shown me exactly who they were and where their loyalties truly lived. There was absolutely no reason to hold back anymore. Okay, I said softly, pulling my phone out of my clutch. You want to talk about reputations. You want to talk about who Preston Sterling really is. Let us listen to what the brilliant innovator sounds like when nobody else is in the room. I unlocked my phone screen and opened the secure audio file my chief operating officer had sent me earlier that week. I turned the volume all the way up and pressed play. The pristine acoustics of the luxury hotel lobby amplified the sound, making it impossible for anyone in our immediate vicinity to ignore. First there was the sound of heavy breathing, followed by a pathetic wet sniffle. Then Preston's voice echoed from the small speaker. He did not sound like the arrogant tech visionary who had just threatened to have me arrested. He sounded like a terrified little boy. Please. The recorded voice of Preston begged, his words thick with tears. This is Preston Sterling again. I am begging you to put me through to the chief executive officer of Apex Holdings. I know she is busy, but you have to tell her I will agree to any terms she wants. I will give up 90% of my equity. I will sign over the Hamptons house. Just please give me the $10 million bridge loan. I cooked the books. I lost the investor capital. The federal agents are going to raid my office on Monday morning, and I'm going to federal prison. Please, you have to save me. I have nothing left. The recording ended with a pathetic sob before the line clicked dead. I pressed the lock button on my phone and slipped it back into my clutch. The silence that followed was absolute. It was so profound that I could hear the soft hum of the hotel air conditioning vents. The smug, arrogant expression on Preston's face had completely vanished, replaced by a mask of sheer, unadulterated horror. He looked like a man who had just watched his own execution broadcast on live television. My father's jaw was hanging completely open. He looked from me to Preston and then back to me, his brain struggling to process the devastating truth he had just heard. He had spent the last 2 years bragging to his wealthy friends at the country club about his brilliant son-in-law. In less than 60 seconds, that entire narrative had been totally obliterated. What was that? My mother whispered, her voice shaking. Preston, what did you just say on that tape? You said you cooked the books. You said the federal agents are coming. Preston opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He swallowed hard, taking a step away from my parents. Allow me to clarify, I said, stepping forward, the heels of my shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor. That was a voicemail Preston left on the private executive line at Apex Holdings 3 days ago. He was standing in my corporate lobby crying so loudly that my security team almost escorted him out of the building. He has been begging my company for a bailout for weeks because his tech startup is nothing but a massive financial illusion. Sienna's face was chalk white. She looked down at her massive diamond engagement ring and then up at Preston. You told me the company was valued at $400 million. She shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. You told me we were rich. You are not rich, Sienna, I stated flatly. You are married to a criminal who is severely in debt. And because you refused to sign a prenuptial agreement, you are legally responsible for that debt too. My father's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. He lunged toward Preston, grabbing him by the lapels of his wrinkled tuxedo jacket. You lied to us, he roared, spit flying from his mouth. You came into my house, you drank my wine, and you made a fool out of my family. I will ruin you. Preston shoved my father back, his own panic turning into defensive rage. Get your hands off me, Richard. You are just as pathetic as I am. You only liked me because I am a wealthy white man who made you look good to your country club friends. You paraded me around like a trophy while treating your own daughter like absolute garbage. Do not act like you have any moral high ground here." My mother let out a loud, dramatic wail, pressing her hands against her face. "We are ruined," she cried. "The scandal is going to be in all the newspapers. Our friends will never speak to us again." While my parents and Sienna were spiraling into a total meltdown, Preston turned his desperate eyes back to me. He suddenly dropped to his knees right there in the middle of the hotel lobby, ruining his expensive trousers. "Maya, please," he begged, clasping his hands together. "You have the money. You can make this go away. I know you are angry, but you cannot let me go to prison. I am family." I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing but cold contempt. "You are not my family, Preston," I said softly. "You are just a parasite who thought he found a convenient host. And you made a fatal mistake when you let your wife treat me like dirt tonight." Sienna suddenly stopped crying. She wiped her smeared makeup and stared at me, a new realization dawning in her eyes. "Wait," she stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You said he left that voicemail for the chief executive officer of Apex Holdings. You said your company." It took her a moment for the pieces to finally click together in her brain. When they did, her knees visibly buckled. "Yes, Sienna," I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. "I am the founder and chief executive officer of Apex Holdings. The cheap little envelope you told me to throw in the trash was the $10 million bailout contract. I was going to save him. I was going to save both of you. But you decided a seat next to the dumpster was a better fit for me. So I decided a federal prison cell was a better fit for him." Sienna let out a sound that was half scream and half sob. She collapsed onto the floor, her massive wedding gown pooling around her like a deflated parachute. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. My parents stood completely frozen, staring at me as if they were looking at a ghost. The daughter they had mocked, belittled, and pushed aside for over 3 decades was standing in front of them as a self-made billionaire. The daughter they had just threatened to destroy was the only person on earth who had the power to save them from total social and financial ruin. My father swallowed hard, his aggressive posture completely deflating. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a sudden, sickening realization of his own catastrophic mistake. "Maya," he started, his voice weak and trembling. "We did not know. If you had just told us who you really were. If I had to tell you I was a billionaire for you to treat me like a human being, then you do not deserve to know me at all," I interrupted, cutting him off completely. I turned to my security guard, who was still standing attentively nearby. "Escort them out of the lobby, please," I instructed smoothly. But as my security guard stepped forward to usher them toward the exit, my mother suddenly broke away. She lunged forward, grabbing my arm with a grip so tight her manicured nails dug painfully into my skin. The initial shock had worn off, and her toxic entitlement was rapidly rushing back to the surface. She was not going to let her precious golden child go down in flames without a vicious fight. My mother's fingernails bit sharply into the soft skin of my forearm, but I did not flinch. I turned my head, slowly looking down at her manicured hand, and then back up to her perfectly made-up face. The mask of shock had completely melted away, replaced by the familiar, demanding scowl I had known since childhood. She was not a mother realizing she had wronged her daughter. She was a socialite realizing her empire was crumbling, and she was desperately clawing for a lifeline. "Wait, Maya," she commanded, her voice completely devoid of the panic from just moments ago. It was replaced by a sharp, toxic authority. "You are not leaving yet. If what you are saying is true, if you really are the chief executive officer of this company, then you have an absolute obligation to fix this mess." I gently but firmly pried her fingers off my arm, taking a deliberate step back to establish a physical boundary. "An obligation?" Helen, I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "What possible obligation do I have to a man who lied to my company and a family who treated me like garbage?" "Because blood is thicker than water, Maya," my mother hissed, her eyes flashing with indignant fury. "Preston may have made a mistake. He may have exaggerated his financial situation, but he is still your sister husband. He is family. You have the money. It is $10 million. To someone in your position, that is nothing. It is pocket change. You cannot sit there with billions of dollars and watch your own sister lose her home. My father eagerly latched onto this new narrative, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with my mother. Your mother is exactly right, Maya. We are family. Families protect each other. You cannot let Preston go to federal prison. Do you have any idea what that would do to our reputation in Atlanta? The country club would revoke our membership immediately. Our friends would turn their backs on us. We would be completely ruined socially and financially. I stared at them, feeling a cold, heavy knot form in my stomach. The sheer audacity of their entitlement was breathtaking. They were not apologizing for pushing me out of the wedding. They were not apologizing for threatening to destroy my career just 10 minutes ago. They were not even angry at Preston for lying to them and stealing millions of dollars. They were entirely focused on their social image, and they expected me to pay the $10 million ransom to protect it. So let me make sure I understand this perfectly, I said, crossing my arms over my chest. Preston committed massive corporate fraud. He stole millions of dollars from innocent investors to buy Sienna a diamond ring and a Hamptons mansion. And your solution is for me to use my own hard-earned money to bail him out so you can keep bragging about him at your golf tournaments. Do not be so dramatic, Maya Sienna chimed in, her voice, returning to its familiar whiny pitch. She had stopped crying and was now wiping her face, looking at me with a mixture of resentment and desperate hope. It is a bridge loan. Preston will pay you back once the new software launches. You are just being greedy. If you really loved me, you would sign the check right now. I looked at my sister wearing a wedding dress paid for by stolen funds, demanding $10 million from the woman she had just banished to the dumpsters. The delusion was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sienna, I said softly, leaning slightly forward. There is no new software. It failed 6 months ago. That is why the federal agents are raiding his office. He is not going to pay anyone back. He is going to prison. Then you just have to give him the money as a gift, my mother stated flatly, as if she were ordering a cup of coffee. You will just write it off. You have enough. You owe this family, Maya. We raised you. We provided for you. You are going to sign that contract and wire the funds first thing Monday morning. If you do not, you are no longer a part of this family. I let out a short, bitter laugh that echoed in the quiet lobby. No longer a part of this family. Helen, you kicked me out of the family the day Sienna was born. I have been an outsider in my own home for 30 years. You only remember I exist when you need someone to pay the bill or fix a problem. You do not want a daughter. You want an automated teller machine. How dare you speak to your mother like that? My father bellowed, taking an aggressive step toward me. My security guard immediately tensed, ready to intervene, but I held up a hand, stopping him. You will listen to us, Maya. My father continued, pointing a thick finger directly at my face. You are going to fix this. You are going to wire that money to Preston account. Because if you do not, I will tell everyone in our circle exactly how selfish you are. I will tell them you let your own sister go bankrupt out of pure spite. I will make sure you are entirely ostracized. The threat was so pathetic, so utterly meaningless to me now, that it actually made me smile. They truly believed their little country club bubble in Atlanta was the entire world. They thought the opinions of a few retired doctors and lawyers meant anything to a woman who negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions on Wall Street. You can tell your friends whatever you want, Richard, I replied, my voice dripping with cold condescension. Tell them I am selfish. Tell them I am a monster. I do not care. My world does not revolve around your country club dinners. I do not need your approval anymore. Preston, who had been silently watching the exchange, suddenly spoke up, his voice trembling with renewed desperation. Maya, please, do not do this. I will do anything. I will sign whatever you want. Just give me a chance to make it right. I looked down at Preston, then back up to my parents and sister. Their faces were twisted with toxic entitlement, expecting me to simply cave to their demands like I always had in the past. But I was not that girl anymore. I was not going to let them walk away thinking they could just bully me into submission. I needed them to feel the full crushing weight of their actions. I needed to set a trap so complete, so devastating that they would never ever attempt to cross me again. A dark, cold idea began to form in the back of my mind. It was ruthless, it was calculating, and it was exactly what they deserved. Fine, I said, letting out a long, weary sigh as if I were finally surrendering. The change in my demeanor was instant, and they fell for it completely. The tension in my parents' shoulders immediately dropped. Sienna let out a loud gasp of relief. Preston's eyes widened with sudden, desperate hope. "You will do it?" my mother asked, a triumphant smirk, already beginning to form on her lips. I nodded slowly, rubbing my temples as if I had a massive headache. "Yes, I will do it, but not right now, and not without absolute security. If I am going to risk $10 million of my company capital on a failing startup, I need collateral. I need ironclad guarantees." "Whatever you need," Preston agreed frantically, nodding his head so fast he looked ridiculous. "Anything. Just name your terms." I looked him dead in the eye, my expression completely blank. "Be at my corporate headquarters on Monday morning, 8 o'clock sharp. Bring your lawyers. Bring Sienna. Bring your parents if you want. We will sign the papers in my boardroom. But be prepared to sign over everything." I turned on my heel and walked back toward the elevators, leaving them standing in the lobby completely unaware that they had just enthusiastically agreed to walk directly into their own execution. The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off my view of their victorious faces. As the luxurious mahogany-paneled car carried me smoothly back up to my penthouse suite, the heavy weight of the past 3 decades began to completely lift from my shoulders. They actually thought they had won. They thought my sudden compliance was just another example of Maya folding under family pressure. My mother probably believed her toxic speech about family loyalty had pierced my conscience. Preston probably thought his desperate begging had successfully manipulated my emotions. And Sienna surely believed that her status as the golden child had magically saved her from financial ruin. They were all so blinded by their own arrogance that they did not even realize the absolute finality of what they had just agreed to do. I stepped out of the elevator and walked straight to my laptop. I did not bother changing out of my vintage teal gown. I picked up my phone and dialed my chief legal counsel, Sarah. She answered on the first ring despite the late hour. "Sarah, I need you to draft a new set of documents for the Sterling account," I said, my voice brisk and entirely focused. "They are coming to the office on Monday morning at 8 o'clock sharp to sign what they believe is the reinstated bridge loan contract." Sarah paused for a second. "Maya, you are not actually giving that fraudster $10 million, are you? He is going to be indicted by the end of next week." "I am not giving him a single dime, Sarah," I replied, a hard smile touching my lips. "I want you to draft a comprehensive asset forfeiture agreement disguised as a collateral requirement. I want it to explicitly state that Preston Sterling and his legal spouse, Sienna Sterling, are putting up every single asset they own as collateral for the loan approval process. I want the Hamptons house, the luxury vehicles, the offshore bank accounts, and every piece of jewelry purchased within the last 24 months specifically listed. Maya, if they sign that they are legally binding themselves to his corporate debt," Sarah warned, her tone shifting to professional concern. "If the federal agent sees his company accounts, which they absolutely will on Monday, Sienna will be held personally liable for millions of dollars. She does not have a prenuptial agreement to protect her." "That is exactly the point, Sarah," I stated coldly. "My sister wanted to marry a billionaire and mock me for being poor. I want her to experience exactly what happens when you build your entire life on a foundation of stolen money. Make sure the language is completely ironclad. When they sign those papers, they are signing away their entire future." "I will have the documents ready by tomorrow morning," Sarah said, her voice reflecting a newfound respect for the brutal strategy. "Do you want me to contact the authorities?" "Yes," I replied, pacing across the thick carpet of my hotel suite. "Contact the lead investigator at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Tell them Preston Sterling will be at the Apex Holdings corporate headquarters on Monday morning. Tell them we are fully cooperating with their investigation, and they can execute their arrest warrant right in my primary boardroom." I ended the call and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the glittering city lights. For years, I had played the role of the obedient, quiet daughter. I had swallowed my pride when my parents praised Sienna for mediocre accomplishments while completely ignoring my grueling 80-hour work weeks. I had paid her rent, bought her groceries, and silently endured her relentless insults because I foolishly believed that one day they would finally see my value. I had spent my entire life trying to buy their love with my generosity and my silence. But standing in the lobby tonight watching my mother threaten to destroy my business just to protect a white man who had lied to her face, I finally understood the truth. They were never going to love me. They were only going to use me. And the moment I stopped being useful, they would discard me without a second thought. The fake surrender in the lobby was not just a business tactic. It was my final goodbye to the family that had never truly wanted me. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "See you on Monday. Wear something professional this time. We need to make sure Preston investors feel confident in your firm." I laughed out loud in the empty room. Even now, standing on the absolute brink of total destruction, my mother was still trying to manage my wardrobe and protect Preston ego. She still thought she was pulling the strings. She still thought she was the director of this pathetic play. I did not reply. I turned off my phone, placed it on the nightstand, and went to sleep. For the first time in my life, I slept incredibly well. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. On Sunday, I went to my corporate office to review the final legal documents with Sarah. The trap was constructed. The collateral agreements were dense, filled with heavy legal jargon that Preston would absolutely rush through in his desperate panic to get the loan money. He would not read the fine print. He would sign his life away, dragging Sienna right down to the bottom of the ocean with him. Sunday evening, I received another text message, this time from Sienna. She had posted a video online holding a glass of champagne in her bridal suite. She was bragging about her amazing new husband and the massive business deal they were closing tomorrow. I laid out my sharp black suit for Monday morning. I was going to watch the golden child completely self-destruct, and I was going to hold the match that burned their fake empire to the ground. I woke up early on Sunday morning, long before the sun even began to rise over the Washington skyline. The penthouse was completely silent, offering a stark contrast to the chaotic screaming match that had taken place in the hotel lobby just 2 nights prior. I brewed a strong cup of black coffee and carried it over to the massive dining table where my chief legal counsel, Sarah, had already arranged the documents. She had worked through the night to ensure every single clause and stipulation was entirely airtight. I sat down and began reading through the thick stack of legal papers. The asset forfeiture agreement was a masterpiece of corporate ruthlessness disguised as a standard collateral requirement. It clearly stated that by signing the document, Preston Sterling and his legal spouse, Sienna Sterling, were voluntarily pledging all of their personal and joint assets to Apex Holdings. This included the Hamptons mansion, the luxury vehicles, their investment portfolios, and even the extravagant 2-carat diamond engagement ring currently sitting on my sister's finger. Sarah walked into the room carrying another stack of folders. She looked tired but deeply satisfied with her work. I spoke with the lead investigator from the Securities and Exchange Commission at 6 o'clock this morning, she said, placing the folders on the table. They have already secured the federal arrest warrants for Preston. They are bringing a team of 6 armed agents to the Apex Holdings corporate headquarters tomorrow morning. They will wait in the security holding room right down the hall from your primary boardroom. The moment Preston signs the fake collateral documents admitting his financial liability, the agents will walk in and place him in handcuffs. I nodded slowly, tracing my finger over the signature line at the bottom of the contract. "And Sienna?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly steady. Sarah let out a heavy sigh. "Because she refused to sign a prenuptial agreement before the wedding, she is legally bound to his financial estate. When the federal government freezes his corporate accounts to recover the stolen investor funds, the collateral agreement she is going to sign tomorrow will give Apex Holdings the legal right to seize everything else they own. She will be left with absolutely nothing, Maya. She will be entirely bankrupt and drowning in legal debt by noon tomorrow." I picked up my coffee cup and took a slow sip. "Good," I replied simply. Sarah gave me a long, searching look before nodding and walking back to her temporary office in the guest suite. I was left alone with the documents and the crushing weight of my family history. Looking at Sienna name printed neatly next to Preston on the legal forms, a bitter memory surfaced, pulling me back to a time when I was incredibly weak and desperate for my parents' approval. I was 24 years old. I had just launched my very first software consulting business out of my tiny apartment. I had worked grueling 18-hour days, eating cheap ramen noodles, and skipping sleep to build a small cash reserve of $40,000. It was my entire life savings and the foundation of my future company. Because I was young and foolishly trusted my family, I had kept my mother name on my primary banking account from when I was a teenager. I wanted her to be proud of me. I wanted her to see the rising account balance and finally acknowledge my hard work. Instead, I woke up one morning to find the entire account completely drained. The balance was absolutely zero. I had panicked thinking I was the victim of identity theft. I called the bank in tears only to be told that my mother Helen had legally withdrawn the entire $40,000 in person the previous afternoon. When I confronted her, she did not even have the decency to look ashamed. She was sitting in our family living room flipping through a luxury magazine. Sienna needed a new car. Maya, my mother had said casually, not even bothering to look up from her magazine. She just landed an interview with a high-end modeling agency. She cannot show up driving a beat-up sedan. She needs to look the part of a successful, wealthy woman. It is an investment in her future. I had stood there completely paralyzed by the betrayal. But Mom, that was my business capital, I had pleaded, my voice cracking with desperation. That was every single dollar I earned. My business will go bankrupt without that money. My father had walked into the room and immediately taken my mother's side. Stop being so incredibly selfish, Maya, he had scolded me, pointing a thick finger at my chest. Your little computer business is just a hobby. Sienna has a real chance to elevate this family status. You should be proud to help your sister succeed. You can always get another job at a real company. They had stolen my entire future to buy Sienna a luxury sports car she crashed less than a year later. They never apologized. They never paid me back. They simply expected me to absorb the massive financial blow and keep quiet to protect the golden child. That was the exact moment I realized my role in the family. I was not a daughter. I was a resource to be harvested whenever Sienna needed a boost. I looked back down at the legal documents sitting on the dining table. The $40,000 they stole from me a decade ago was nothing compared to the empire I had built since then. But it was never about the money. It was about the absolute lack of respect. It was about the fact that they viewed my hard work as completely worthless and Sienna's mere existence as infinitely valuable. They thought they were walking into my office to bully me. They were completely wrong. I was going to destroy their fake empire tomorrow morning permanently. Sunday afternoon arrived with a quiet stillness in my luxury hotel suite. I had spent the entire morning reviewing the final legal traps with Sarah, and now there was nothing left to do but wait for Monday morning. I sat on the plush velvet sofa, overlooking the city, with a glass of iced sparkling water in my hand. Out of sheer morbid curiosity, I unlocked my personal phone and opened the social media application. I clicked on Sienna's profile. I knew she would not be able to resist gloating after she thought she had successfully bullied me into submission last night. I was absolutely right. She had just uploaded a brand new video 3 minutes ago. It was titled, Sunday Brunch with the New Mrs. Sterling. I tapped the screen and watched as my sister's face filled the display. She was lounging in what looked like a luxury private cabana at her hotel, wearing an oversized designer sun hat and a white silk robe. She held up a crystal flute filled with expensive champagne to the camera, her 2-carat diamond engagement ring sparkling aggressively in the bright sunlight. Hey guys, Sienna chirped, her voice dripping with that fake sugary sweetness she always used for her online audience. I just wanted to jump on here and give you a quick wedding weekend update. The ceremony was an absolute dream. Preston is the most amazing husband in the entire world. But the absolute best part of the weekend is the massive business deal we just closed. I leaned back against the sofa cushions watching her spin her delusional web. You know, I have always kept my family life incredibly private. Sienna continued taking a delicate sip of her champagne. But I am just so proud today. My older sister Maya is actually a massive private equity billionaire. I know, right? It is crazy. She runs Apex Holdings, and she believes in my husband's tech company so much that she is personally funding his next expansion with a $10 million investment. Sienna leaned closer to the camera, lowering her voice, as if she were sharing an exclusive secret with her followers. Honestly, it just goes to show how important family loyalty is, she whispered. Maya and I have such a strong bond. She knows Preston is a visionary, and she practically begged to be part of his company. We are heading to her corporate headquarters tomorrow morning to sign the final partnership agreements. We are about to be the ultimate billionaire family dynasty. I let out a harsh laugh that echoed loudly in the quiet suite. A family dynasty. She was literally bragging about the financial noose she was going to gladly slip around her own neck in less than 24 hours. The video transitioned to a montage of her flashing her jewelry, showing off the expensive cabana, and panning the camera over to Preston. He was sitting in a lounge chair next to her, looking pale and incredibly stressed. He managed a weak, forced smile for the camera before quickly looking away. He knew exactly what was on the line tomorrow. He knew he was forcing his newlywed wife to sign away their entire future just to save his own skin. But he was too much of a coward to stop her. I scrolled down to read the comments section beneath the video. My mother Helen was already the top comment. She had written, "So proud of my beautiful girls. Family always supports family. Preston is going to change the world." My father Richard had replied underneath it with a series of clapping emojis. They had built an entire alternate reality where they were the undisputed winners and I was just the obedient bank account. I opened our family group chat. The notifications had been muted since Friday, but I decided to take a look anyway. There were dozens of new messages from earlier that morning. My mother had sent links to luxury interior designers for the Hamptons mansion they falsely believed Preston still owned. Sienna had sent pictures of a custom yacht she wanted to charter for their upcoming honeymoon in Greece, using my supposed $10 million investment to pay for the extravagant trip. "Are we still doing a celebratory dinner tomorrow night after we sign the papers, Maya?" My mother had texted the group chat around noon. "We should go to Belmont's. We need to toast to Preston new company valuation." "You are paying, of course, Maya." I stared at the glowing screen. They were planning a massive victory dinner. They were picking out luxury yachts. They were completely blind to the massive freight train of justice barreling directly toward them. I did not reply to the group chat. I simply locked my phone and tossed it onto the glass coffee table. Sienna arrogance was the exact reason this trap was going to work flawlessly. If she possessed even a single ounce of humility or self-awareness, she might actually read the legal documents tomorrow. She might hire her own independent lawyer to review the asset forfeiture clauses. She might realize that a woman she had treated like garbage for 30 years would not suddenly hand over $10 million with absolutely no strings attached. But Sienna was totally incapable of seeing beyond her own reflection. She truly believed she was entitled to my wealth simply because she shared my last name. She thought her status as the beautiful favored daughter made her completely invincible. She thought the rules of the real world did not apply to her. Tomorrow morning, the real world was going to violently introduce itself. She was going to walk into my boardroom expecting a golden crown, and she was going to walk out with a pair of federal handcuffs waiting for her husband. The golden child had played her final card. The stage was perfectly set. The audience was seated, and the curtains were finally ready to rise on the absolute destruction of the Sterling family facade. Monday morning arrived, bringing with it a crisp, professional energy that filled the bustling streets of downtown Washington. My corporate headquarters was located in the penthouse levels of a towering glass skyscraper, a sleek, modern fortress of wealth and calculated power. I arrived at the office early, dressed in a sharp, tailored black suit that left absolutely no room for misinterpretation. I was not there as a sister or a daughter. I was there as the chief executive officer executing a flawless hostile takeover of my own family. I settled into the plush leather chair in my private security monitoring room, pouring myself a cup of dark roast coffee. The wall in front of me was lined with high-definition monitors displaying live feeds from every camera in the building. Sarah, my chief legal counsel, stepped into the room holding a tablet. "The federal agents are in position, Maya," Sarah said, her voice hushed and serious. "6 armed officers from the Securities and Exchange Commission are waiting in Conference Room B just down the hall from the primary boardroom. They are monitoring the audio feed. The moment Preston signs the asset forfeiture agreement and admits his financial liability, they will move in to execute the arrest warrants." "Thank you, Sarah," I replied, keeping my eyes glued to the monitors. "Are the Sterling family in the lobby yet?" Sarah checked her tablet. Security just scanned them in at the ground floor. "They are heading up in the private executive elevator right now." I leaned closer to the screens, watching the live feed from the elevator interior. My parents, Sienna and Preston, stood in the small, enclosed space, looking like a bizarre parody of a wealthy family. My mother was wearing an aggressively bright pink designer suit, her hair styled impeccably, as if she were attending a society luncheon rather than a high-stakes corporate meeting. My father stood next to her, puffing his chest out, trying to look like a commanding patriarch. Sienna was dressed in head-to-toe white, clearly still trying to play the role of the innocent, blushing bride clutching a luxury handbag that cost more than my first car. Preston looked absolutely terrible. He was wearing a dark suit, but his skin was pale and covered in a thin sheen of nervous sweat. He kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, his eyes darting frantically around the elevator. The elevator doors chimed open on the executive floor, revealing the stunning expanse of the Apex Holdings reception area. The floors were polished white marble, the walls lined with expensive modern art, and the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the entire city. My head receptionist, a brilliant young woman named Chloe, stood behind the sleek curved desk, greeting them with a polite professional smile. "Good morning, welcome to Apex Holdings," Chloe said smoothly. "You must be the Sterling party. Miss Maya is expecting you in the primary boardroom. Please follow me." My mother did not even look at Chloe. She simply waved her hand dismissively as if swatting away a pesky fly. "Yes, yes, we know who we are." My mother snapped, her voice echoing loudly in the quiet, elegant space. "Tell my daughter we expect coffee and sparkling water immediately, and make sure it is the imported kind. We do not drink tap water." Chloe maintained her professional composure, though I could see a brief flash of irritation in her eyes. "I will have the catering staff bring refreshments to the boardroom right away, ma'am," Chloe replied, leading them down the long glass hallway. Sienna was busy looking around the office, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and deep-seated jealousy. She paused to inspect a massive abstract painting hanging on the wall, running her hand along the expensive frame. "It is nice," she said loudly, clearly wanting my staff to hear her. "But it feels a little cold, do not you think? When Preston and I take over the marketing division, we are definitely going to redecorate. We need to warm this place up. It feels too corporate." I chuckled softly in the dark security room, taking another sip of my coffee. She actually thought she was going to be given a job. She genuinely believed this $10 million bailout came with an executive title and an office decorating budget. My father was equally arrogant. As they walked past a row of glass-walled cubicles where my top financial analysts were hard at work, he stopped and tapped loudly on the glass. "Hey, you!" he barked at a senior analyst who was deeply focused on a complex spreadsheet. "Bring me a financial prospectus of your current quarter. I want to see what kind of operation my daughter is running here before we sign any final partnership agreements." The senior analyst, a man who managed portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars, looked up at my father with an expression of utter bewilderment. He glanced toward Chloe, who gave him a subtle shake of her head. "I am sorry, sir," the analyst replied politely but firmly. "All financial data is strictly confidential. You will have to request that information directly from the chief executive officer." My father's face turned red. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded, puffing out his chest. "I am Richard Sterling. Maya is my daughter. When I ask for a report, you jump. Sir, please." Chloe intervened smoothly, stepping between my father and the glass wall. "The boardroom is just right this way. Let us not disrupt the analysts." My father grumbled something under his breath, adjusting his tie and following Chloe down the hall. They were treating my highly educated, dedicated staff like personal servants. They were walking through my corporate empire, acting as if they owned the very floor beneath their feet. Their sheer entitlement was staggering, but it only solidified my resolve. Every rude comment, every dismissive gesture just confirmed that I was doing exactly the right thing. They arrived at the heavy oak doors of the primary boardroom. Chloe opened them, gesturing for the family to enter. The room was massive, featuring a long, polished mahogany table surrounded by plush leather executive chairs. The massive windows offered an unobstructed view of the Capitol building. Sarah was already seated at the table, arranging the thick stacks of legal documents into neat, precise piles. "Where is Maya?" my mother demanded, immediately taking the seat at the head of the table, a blatant power move that made me smile. "She should be here to greet us. It is incredibly disrespectful to keep your family waiting." "Miss Maya will be with you momentarily," Sarah replied calmly, not looking up from the documents. "Please take a seat and review the paperwork. The catering staff will be right in with your beverages." Preston practically sprinted to the table, his eyes locked onto the thick stack of papers. He collapsed into a chair, pulling the documents toward him with trembling hands. Sienna sat next to him, crossing her legs and checking her makeup in the reflection of her phone screen. "Make sure you read the fine print," Preston, my father, instructed, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. "We do not want Maya trying to slip any hidden management fees into the contract. She has always been a little sneaky when it comes to money." I watched the monitors as Preston frantically flipped through the pages. He was not reading the fine print. He was not reading the clauses. His eyes were just scanning the bottom of the pages, looking for the signature lines. He was a desperate, drowning man, reaching for a life preserver, completely unaware that the preserver was made of solid lead. "It is time," I said to Sarah through my earpiece. I stood up from the leather chair, smoothing out my sharp black suit. I walked out of the security room and headed down the long glass hallway toward the primary boardroom. The trap was fully set. The bait had been taken. It was time to close the jaws. The heavy oak doors of the primary boardroom swung open under my firm push. The low murmur of my family hushed chatter died instantly. All four heads snapped toward the entrance. I stepped into the room, my heels clicking sharply against the polished hardwood floor. I did not smile. I did not offer a warm greeting. I walked directly to the head of the massive mahogany table, the exact seat my mother had presumptuously claimed for herself just moments ago. She looked up at me, her eyes briefly flashing with deep irritation. "Maya, you are finally here," my mother said, attempting to mask her annoyance with a thin, strained smile. "We have been waiting for 15 minutes. The catering staff brought sparkling water, but we specifically asked for the imported Italian brand. This is completely unacceptable for a high-level corporate environment." I stopped right next to her chair, looking down at her perfectly styled hair and her loud pink designer suit. I did not say a single solitary word. I simply held her gaze with a cold, unyielding stare until the confident, arrogant smirk slowly melted completely off her face. The silence in the massive room stretched, becoming heavy and deeply uncomfortable. "Helen," I said, my voice low and entirely devoid of any familial warmth. "You are sitting in my chair. Get up from that chair right now, Helen." My father bristled, leaning forward and placing his hands flat on the table. "Now listen here, Maya. There is absolutely no need to be disrespectful to your mother. We are here to do business and save this company. You need to drop this childish attitude." I shifted my cold gaze directly to him. "Richard, if you speak out of turn in my boardroom again, I will have my security team escort you out of the building. Get up, Helen." My mother's face flushed a deep, angry red, but something in my deadpan expression told her I was absolutely not bluffing. She gathered her expensive designer handbag and quickly shuffled to a chair on the far side of the table, sitting right next to Sienna. I sat down in the high-backed leather executive chair, placing my hands flat on the mahogany surface. The power dynamic in the room shifted instantly. They were no longer the domineering parents scolding their disappointing daughter. They were guests in my empire, and they were suddenly very aware of it. Preston cleared his throat aggressively, adjusting his wrinkled suit jacket. He stood up from his chair, plastering on a fake, confident smile that did not reach his terrified eyes. He walked toward my end of the table, extending his right hand for a professional corporate handshake. Maya, it is fantastic to see you in your element, he said, his voice slightly too loud, attempting to project a false authority. I have to admit, I am incredibly impressed by the massive operation you have built here. I think Sterling Technologies and Apex Holdings are going to find a lot of incredible synergy in this partnership. We have completely aligned visions for the future of the tech industry, and I am ready to get the ball rolling today. I looked at his outstretched hand. I did not move an inch. I let him stand there like an absolute fool, his hand hovering awkwardly over the polished wood for 10 agonizing seconds. Slowly, the fake confident smile began to crack and crumble. He pulled his hand back, wiping his sweaty palm nervously on the side of his expensive trousers. We are not partners, Preston, I said, my voice cutting through the silent room like a sharp razor blade. Do not ever use the word synergy in my presence again. You are not acquiring a company, and we are not merging our assets. You are sitting in that chair because you are a desperate man, begging for a financial lifeline to keep yourself out of federal prison. You are not my peer. You are a massive liability. Preston swallowed hard, his face turning exceptionally pale. Now, Maya, let us keep this strictly professional, he stammered, taking a quick step back toward his own chair. We had a verbal agreement. I bring the proprietary software, the massive market potential, and the brilliant engineering team, and you provide the capital bridge to get us to the next fiscal quarter. It is a standard venture capital arrangement between two executives. A standard venture capital arrangement, I repeated, leaning back in my heavy leather chair. Preston, your proprietary software failed its primary beta test 6 months ago. Your lead developers quit last month because you entirely stopped paying them. You have absolutely zero market potential because you lied to your current investors and funneled their capital into personal offshore accounts. You do not have a tech company. You have a massive crime scene disguised as a startup. Sienna gasped loudly, clutching her white designer bag tightly to her chest. Preston, that is not true, she shrilled, looking at him with wide, terrified eyes. Tell her that is not true. You promised me we were going to be billionaires. Preston completely ignored his wife, gripping the edge of the table. His knuckles were entirely white. Maya, I am willing to give you a dedicated seat on the board, he offered, his voice cracking under the intense pressure. I will give you full veto power over all future marketing campaigns. We can completely rebrand the software. We can rebuild this empire together. Just sign the wire transfer. I let out a short, harsh laugh that bounced off the glass walls. A seat on your board. Preston, your board of directors received my formal email on Saturday night. They convened an emergency executive meeting yesterday morning while you were busy filming videos by the hotel pool. You no longer have a board because you no longer have a job. You were officially terminated as Chief Executive Officer of Sterling Technologies at exactly 9:00 last night. Preston's legs completely gave out beneath him. He collapsed back into his leather chair, his mouth hanging open in sheer disbelief. My father slammed his fist heavily against the table, rattling the crystal water glasses. This is an absolute outrage, he yelled, his face turning purple. You cannot just fire him. He founded the company. He is the ultimate visionary here. Richard, I strongly suggest you remain quiet. I warned him, my voice rising just enough to command absolute silence in the room. Apex Holdings is not a charity. I do not invest in fake visionaries who steal millions from their own trusting employees. I looked at my father, watching his face turn a deep shade of crimson as the reality of my words hung heavily in the quiet boardroom. Richard, I strongly suggest you remain quiet. I warned him again, my voice rising just enough to command absolute silence in the room. Apex Holdings is not a charity. I do not invest in fake visionaries who steal millions from their own trusting employees. I turned my attention back to Preston. He was staring at me with wide, terrified eyes, looking completely shattered. You came here today expecting a massive wire transfer, Preston? I said, leaning forward slightly in my heavy leather chair. You thought you could just walk into my office, sign a piece of paper, and walk out with $10 million of my hard-earned money. But I told you on Saturday night that the deal was completely dead. I meant exactly what I said. Sienna suddenly slammed her hands flat against the mahogany table. Then why did you tell us to come here? She shrieked, her voice echoing shrilly off the glass walls. Why did you make us wake up early and drive all the way down here if you were not going to give Preston the money? You are just playing cruel mind games because you are a bitter, jealous woman, Maya. I did not ask you to come here to play games, Sienna, I replied calmly, reaching out to the neat stack of documents Sarah had prepared. I asked you to come here so we could formally conclude our business. I picked up 3 separate manila folders and slid them slowly across the long polished table. They came to a stop directly in front of Preston and Sienna. Go ahead, Preston, I urged him, gesturing toward the folders. Open them. Let us review the synergy you were just talking about. Preston's hands shook violently as he reached out and flipped open the first folder. Inside was a thick stack of papers bearing the official seal of the Securities and Exchange Commission. He stared at the top page, his eyes darting frantically back and forth as he read the bold heading. Notice of formal investigation and whistleblower complaint. What is this? He whispered, his voice barely audible. That is a copy of the formal whistleblower report I submitted to the federal government on Saturday morning. I explained, keeping my tone entirely conversational. As a licensed financial institution, Apex Holdings is legally obligated to report any confirmed instances of corporate fraud or embezzlement we discover during our due diligence process. We provided the Securities and Exchange Commission with the complete financial records you submitted to our underwriting team. Those records clearly show the massive discrepancies between your reported revenue and your actual capital reserves. My mother gasped loudly, pressing a hand to her chest. You turned him in, she cried out. You reported your own brother-in-law to the federal government. How could you do something so incredibly vindictive? I ignored her completely and nodded toward the second folder. Open the next one, Preston. He swallowed hard, looking like he was about to be physically sick. He reached out with trembling fingers and flipped open the second manila folder. This document bore the letterhead of his primary corporate banking institution. That is a formal notification of an absolute asset freeze, I said, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. Effective at exactly 8 o'clock this morning, the federal government has officially frozen every single corporate and personal bank account associated with Preston Sterling and Sterling Technologies. You cannot withdraw a single dollar. You cannot transfer any funds. You cannot even buy a cup of coffee using those accounts. Sienna let out a sharp, terrified cry. She lunged forward, grabbing the paper from Preston's hands and scanning the text herself. No, she stammered, shaking her head rapidly. No, this cannot be right. I just tried to buy a coffee downstairs and my card declined. I thought it was just a simple bank error. It was not an error, Sienna, I stated flatly. The federal agents are actively recovering the millions of dollars your husband stole from his investors. And because he transferred significant portions of those stolen funds into your joint accounts to pay for your massive wedding and your luxury lifestyle, the government has frozen your personal accounts as well. My father was completely silent now, his previous arrogant bluster entirely gone. He stared at the documents on the table, looking as if he had just watched his entire world crumble into dust. He finally understood the absolute gravity of the situation. There was no social maneuvering out of this. There was no country club connection that could save them from a federal indictment. I gestured toward the final folder resting on the mahogany surface. There is one more, Preston. Go ahead and open it. Let us get all the bad news out of the way at once. Preston did not move. He just sat there staring blankly at the wall, his breathing shallow and rapid. Sienna was sobbing quietly next to him, clutching her luxury handbag as if it were a life preserver. Since he seems incapable, I will just tell you what is in the third folder. I continued, my voice echoing clearly in the quiet room. It is a formal notice of foreclosure from Apex Holdings. Foreclosure? My mother asked, her voice trembling with confusion. What do you mean foreclosure? They do not have a mortgage with your company. Actually, Helen, they do. I corrected her, a tight, cold smile touching my lips. When Preston was desperately searching for capital 3 months ago, he quietly took out a massive secondary loan against the Hamptons mansion he purchased. He used a shadow lending firm to secure the cash. Last week, Apex Holdings completely bought out that shadow lending firm, effectively acquiring all of their active debt portfolios. I paused, letting the heavy silence stretch for a moment so they could fully process the absolute devastation of my words. Preston defaulted on that secondary loan over 45 days ago, I explained. And as the new primary debt holder, Apex Holdings is officially exercising our legal right to seize the collateral. The Hamptons mansion is gone. We are repossessing the property immediately. Sienna let out a loud, gut-wrenching scream. She threw the documents down on the table, burying her face in her hands. We are going to be homeless, she wailed loudly. We have absolutely nothing left. Preston finally turned to look at me, his eyes red and completely wild. You planned this, he hissed, his voice dripping with pure hatred. You bought my debt just so you could take my house. You orchestrated this entire thing to ruin us. I did not orchestrate your decision to steal millions of dollars, Preston, I replied, my voice dropping to a hard, unforgiving tone. I did not force you to lie to your board of directors. I did not make you falsify your revenue reports. You ruined yourself. I just decided to stop pretending that your massive house of cards was an actual castle. The boardroom was filled only with the sound of Sienna's loud, hysterical sobbing. My parents sat completely frozen, staring at the 3 documents on the table that represented the total annihilation of their golden child, perfect life. They had come here expecting to bully me into handing over $10 million. Instead, I had handed them the absolute destruction of their fake empire. The silence following my declaration hung in the air for only a few seconds before the reality of the situation fully fractured Preston Sterling. He stared at the foreclosure notice, the absolute final nail in his meticulously crafted coffin, and something inside him simply snapped. The charming, sophisticated tech entrepreneur mask he had worn for 2 years evaporated entirely. What was left behind was a cornered, vicious animal. He slowly pushed his leather chair back and stood up, towering over Sienna, who was still weeping into her hands. He did not look at me. He looked down at his new wife with a level of pure, unadulterated disgust that made even my father flinch. This is your fault, Preston snarled, his voice dropping to a terrifying guttural register. Sienna flinched, looking up at him with mascara running down her cheeks. What? She stammered. How is this my fault? You are the one who lied about the money. You are the one who committed fraud. I had the money. Preston roared, slamming his fist onto the table so hard the water glasses rattled dangerously. I had the $10 million secured. Apex Holdings agreed to the terms. Maya brought the contract to the wedding. All you had to do was smile, be a gracious host, and let her sit at a decent table. But you could not do that, could you? You had to be the center of attention. You had to humiliate her to stroke your own massive, pathetic ego. You threw my salvation out like the trash because you are a shallow, vapid idiot. My mother gasped, jumping up from her chair. Do not you dare speak to my daughter that way, she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at Preston. She is your wife. You lied to her. You told us you were a billionaire. Preston whipped his head around to face my mother, his eyes blazing with manic fury. Oh, shut up, Helen. He spat, the disrespect so profound it made my mother stagger backward. You are just as bad as she is. Do you think I actually enjoyed spending time with you people? Do you think I enjoyed listening to your boring country club stories or watching you parade me around like some prize stallion to impress your snobby friends? You did not love me. You loved my perceived whiteness and my perceived bank account. You loved the status I brought to your pathetic, insecure family. My father's face turned a dark, violent shade of purple. He lunged around the table, grabbing Preston by the shoulder. "I will break your jaw, you arrogant little punk," my father growled, raising his fist. Preston shoved my father backward with shocking force, sending the older man stumbling into the glass wall. "Go ahead, Richard." Preston laughed a harsh, hysterical sound. "Assault me. Add a battery charge to your family tab today. You are a joke. You spent 2 years kissing my feet while treating the daughter who actually holds real power like absolute garbage. You drove Maya away to protect this brainless gold digger," he pointed aggressively at Sienna, "and now you are all going to pay the ultimate price." Sienna scrambled out of her chair, her sadness completely overridden by pure venomous rage. "I am a gold digger," she shrieked, launching herself at him and shoving him hard in the chest. "You are a criminal, Preston. You are going to federal prison. I am going to divorce you so fast your head will spin. I will take half of whatever is left of your pathetic life." "Take half of what?" Preston screamed right back, leaning into her face. "Half of the debt. Half of the federal indictments. We do not have a prenuptial agreement, Sienna. You refused to sign one because you wanted access to all of my accounts. Well, congratulations, sweetheart. You got exactly what you asked for. When the federal agents seize my assets, they are taking your accounts too. They are taking your car, your jewelry, and every single dime you have to your name. You are going down with me. You promised me. Paris." Sienna sobbed hysterically, hitting his chest with her fists. "You promised me a mansion in the Hamptons. You ruined my entire life." "You ruined my life," Preston bellowed, catching her wrists and pushing her back. "If you had just treated your sister with 1 ounce of basic human decency, I would have my company. I would have my freedom, you arrogant, spoiled little brat." The pristine corporate boardroom rapidly devolved into an absolute war zone. The perfect interracial high society marriage they had broadcasted all over the internet just 24 hours ago was completely exposed as a transactional sham. Preston had wanted a beautiful trophy wife to make him look like a stable family man to his investors. Sienna had wanted a wealthy white tech mogul to elevate her status and bankroll her luxurious delusions. Neither of them actually loved the other. They loved what the other represented. And now that the illusions were entirely shattered, there was nothing left but raw, toxic hatred. "You are nothing!" Sienna screamed, her voice cracking. "You are a fake! You do not even know how to code your own software. You are just a con artist in a custom suit." "And what exactly are you?" Preston fired back, his words dripping with venom. "You have never worked a real day in your life. You spent the last 10 years living off Maya money and my stolen credit cards. You contribute absolutely nothing to society. The only thing you are good at is posting fake videos online pretending to be someone important. You are a parasite, Sienna." My mother tried to intervene again, grabbing Sienna's arm to pull her away. "Stop it, both of you," she pleaded, crying openly now. "Maya is right here. Maya can still fix this. We can renegotiate the terms. We can make a deal." Preston let out a dark, terrifying laugh, turning his wild eyes back to me. "Make a deal," he mocked, shaking his head. "Look at her, Helen. Look at the woman you shoved to the side of a dumpster. Do you honestly think she is going to negotiate with us? She planned this. She brought us up here to watch us bleed out on her boardroom floor." I sat perfectly still in my high-backed leather chair, resting my chin on my steepled fingers. I did not intervene. I did not raise my voice. I simply watched them tear each other apart with cold, clinical satisfaction. For 33 years, I had been the designated punching bag for this family. I was the one who absorbed their insults, their financial abuse, and their emotional manipulation. They had always presented a united front against me, a solid wall of arrogant superiority. But it only took 3 manila folders to completely obliterate that wall. Stripped of their fake wealth and their unearned social status, they were immediately turning on each other like starving wolves. The loyalty my mother had preached about in the hotel lobby was completely non-existent. Blood was not thicker than water in the Sterling family. Blood was just a currency they traded when it suited them. "I am calling my lawyers," my father shouted, pulling out his phone with trembling hands. I will get this entire thing annulled. You will not drag my daughter down into your criminal mess, Preston. You do that? Richard? Preston sneered, turning his back on my father. Call your country club lawyers. See if they can fight the Securities and Exchange Commission. See if they can fight a $3 billion private equity firm. You are completely out of your league, old man. The screaming intensified, their voices bouncing violently off the glass walls. Sienna called Preston every vile name she could think of. Preston hurled insults about her intelligence and her fake lifestyle. My parents yelled at both of them, desperately trying to regain control of a situation that was entirely beyond saving. The chaos was deafening, absolute bedlam inside the most powerful room in my building. I leaned back and picked up my coffee cup from the table, letting the hot, dark liquid slide smoothly down my throat. The taste was rich and slightly bitter, perfectly matching the absolute carnage unfolding in front of me. The shouting match between my family members had reached a fever pitch. Sienna was now openly weeping, her makeup completely ruined, as she screamed about her lost Paris vacation and her ruined social standing. Preston was pacing wildly behind his chair, shouting at my father, while simultaneously trying to check his phone for a miracle that was absolutely never going to arrive. My mother was clutching her pearls, quite literally begging anyone in the room to just calm down and figure out a way to spin this story for the country club. It was an exquisite display of complete and total moral bankruptcy. They were not mourning the loss of their integrity. They were mourning the loss of their stolen money. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open with tremendous force. The heavy thud of the doors hitting the wall instantly silenced the screaming match. Everyone froze, turning their heads toward the entrance. 6 men and women walked into the room, moving with a swift, tactical precision that completely sucked the air out of the room. They were not wearing business suits. They were wearing dark windbreakers with large yellow letters printed across the back and chest. FBI. Preston's phone slipped from his trembling hands and clattered loudly onto the polished mahogany table. He took a staggering step backward, bumping into the large floor-to-ceiling windows. The lead agent, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a completely emotionless expression, stepped forward. He did not look at my parents or Sienna. His eyes locked entirely onto Preston. Preston Sterling, the lead agent, barked, his voice echoing off the glass walls with absolute, undeniable authority. You are under arrest for multiple counts of wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and the falsification of financial documents in violation of federal securities laws. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Sienna let out a high-pitched, terrified shriek, stumbling backward until she hit the wall. She pressed her hands over her mouth, her wide, panicked eyes darting between the federal agents and her husband. My mother let out a small, pathetic whimper and collapsed back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. My father stood completely frozen, his mouth hanging open, unable to process the reality of federal law enforcement standing in the same room as his precious golden child. Preston did not turn around. He held his hands up in a desperate, placating gesture, his entire body shaking violently. Wait, he stammered, his voice cracking into a high, desperate whine. This is a massive misunderstanding. I was just securing bridge financing. The funds were coming. Maya, tell them. Tell them we were just finalizing the contract right now. He pointed a shaking finger at me, his eyes pleading for a lifeline he absolutely did not deserve. I took another slow sip of my coffee. I set the cup down carefully on the coaster, making sure not to stain the mahogany. I looked at the lead agent and offered a polite professional nod. The documents confirming his fraudulent financial reporting are in the first manila folder on the table, agent, I said calmly. Apex Holdings has officially declined all financing based on the evidence of his criminal activity. He has absolutely no funding. You bitch! Preston screamed, his face contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He lunged forward, grabbing the edge of the table as if he were going to launch himself across it to attack me. He did not even make it halfway. 2 federal agents moved with blinding speed, grabbing his arms and violently twisting them behind his back. Preston let out a sharp cry of pain as the heavy metal handcuffs ratcheted tightly around his wrists. The sharp metallic click echoed through the silent boardroom, sounding like a gunshot. "Get your hands off me!" Preston yelled, struggling wildly against the agents. "Do you know who I am? I am a tech founder. I have powerful investors. You cannot do this to me. You have the right to remain silent." The lead agent began reading the Miranda rights in a bored, monotone voice, completely ignoring Preston's frantic struggling. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." I watched with absolute clinical detachment as the brilliant tech genius, the wealthy white savior my parents had worshipped, was physically dragged away from the table. His expensive, custom-tailored suit was rumpled and pulled askew. His face was red and covered in sweat. He looked pathetic. He looked exactly like the common criminal he truly was. As they dragged him toward the door, he twisted his head around, looking desperately at Sienna. "Call my lawyers," he shouted over his shoulder, his voice echoing down the glass hallway. "Sienna, call them right now. Tell them to get down here." Sienna did not move. She remained pressed flat against the wall, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, staring at her husband in absolute horror. She was watching her entire fake reality, the luxury cars, the Hamptons mansion, the country club status, being physically hauled out of the room in federal handcuffs. The lead agent paused by the table and picked up the first manila folder, tucking it under his arm. "Thank you for your full cooperation, Miss Maya," he said, giving me a brief, respectful nod. "The Securities and Exchange Commission appreciates your diligence in reporting this matter so promptly." "It is my corporate responsibility," I replied simply. The agents marched Preston out the heavy oak doors, pulling them shut behind them with a definitive, solid click. The sudden silence in the boardroom was absolutely deafening. The air felt heavy, thick with the crushing realization of what had just occurred. I remained seated in my high-backed leather chair, completely relaxed. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt or pity. I felt entirely vindicated. My mother slowly raised her head from her hands. Her face was streaked with tears, her expensive makeup completely ruined. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of profound shock and deep, simmering anger. "Are you happy now, Maya?" My mother whispered, her voice trembling with toxic resentment. "You got exactly what you wanted. You completely destroyed your sister life. You humiliated our family. I hope you are incredibly proud of yourself." I looked at my mother, refusing to let her twist this narrative. "I did not destroy her life, Helen," I said, my voice cold and hard. "Her husband destroyed her life when he decided to steal millions of dollars. You destroyed her life by teaching her that marrying a wealthy man was more important than building her own character. I just refused to pay the ransom to protect your precious illusions." My father finally found his voice, though it was weak and completely devoid of its usual arrogant bluster. "What are we going to do?" he muttered, staring blankly at the polished table. "The newspapers are going to get a hold of this. His arrest is a matter of public record. Our friends are going to find out." "That is your primary concern?" I asked, shaking my head in sheer disbelief. "Your son-in-law was just hauled away in handcuffs for a multi-million-dollar federal felony, and you are worried about what the people at your golf club are going to think. You are incredibly pathetic, Richard." Sienna suddenly pushed herself off the wall. She staggered toward the table, her white dress looking completely absurd in the aftermath of a federal raid. She grabbed the edge of the mahogany table, her knuckles white, leaning forward to look at me with desperate, tear-filled eyes. "Maya, please!" Sienna begged, her voice cracking into a loud, hysterical sob. "You have to help me. I do not have any money. They froze my accounts. I cannot pay for a lawyer. I cannot even buy groceries. You have to give me something. I am your sister." I looked at her, the golden child who had told me to sit by the dumpsters just 3 days ago. The sister who had shoved a $20 bill in my hand and told me I was a broke embarrassment. "You should have kept that $100 gift card I offered you at the wedding, Sienna," I replied, my voice completely devoid of any sympathy. "You are going to need it." Sienna recoiled as if I had physically struck her across the face. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound coming out. The sheer brutality of my statement finally pierced through the thick layer of delusion she had worn her entire life. She looked down at her hands at the massive 2-carat diamond engagement ring that was supposed to be her absolute guarantee of a life filled with luxury and effortless superiority. Maya, you do not understand. She finally choked out, her voice dropping to a frantic, desperate whisper. I cannot go to jail. I did not do anything wrong. I just married him. I did not know he was stealing money. You did not care where the money came from, Sienna. I corrected her, leaning forward, resting my arms on the mahogany table. You only cared that it was being spent on you. You gladly turned a blind eye to every single red flag because he bought you expensive purses and took you to high society galas. And now you are going to pay the exact price for that willful ignorance. My mother slammed her hands on the table, desperately trying to regain some semblance of control over the rapidly disintegrating situation. Maya, that is enough. She snapped, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and stubborn authority. Stop torturing your sister. She is a victim in all of this. Preston deceived all of us. You have a massive team of corporate lawyers at your disposal. You are going to call them right now and have them represent Sienna. You are going to protect her assets and get this marriage annulled before the press gets a hold of the story. I looked at my mother, completely marveling at her endless capacity for denial. Protect her assets, Helen? I asked, raising an eyebrow. What assets exactly are you referring to? Her bank accounts, my mother insisted, waving her hand frantically. Her car, her apartment, the things she owned before she married that monster. I let out a slow, heavy sigh, shaking my head. You really do not understand how any of this works, do you? I turned my attention back to my weeping sister. Sienna, do you remember when you called me 3 months ago bragging about your wedding plans? Do you remember what you told me when I strongly advised you to sign a prenuptial agreement? Sienna's face turned an even paler shade of white. She swallowed hard, tears spilling over her eyelashes and dropping onto her expensive white dress. Let me refresh your memory, I continued, my voice echoing with cold precision in the quiet boardroom. You laughed at me. You told me that prenuptial agreements were only for people who did not truly trust each other. But the real truth, the truth you bragged about to your bridesmaids, was that you thought Preston was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You thought a prenuptial agreement would limit your access to his massive fortune in the event of a divorce. You wanted to make sure you were legally entitled to exactly half of his empire. Sienna let out a choked sob, pressing her hands against her face. Stop, she whimpered. Please stop. But you got exactly what you wanted, Sienna, I said, refusing to let her look away from the absolute reality of her choices. By refusing to sign that prenuptial agreement, you legally bound yourself to his financial estate. You are now legally entitled to exactly half of his empire. But his empire is not made of money. His empire is made of massive federal debt, stolen investor capital, and restitution fines. My father let out a low groan, sinking back into his chair and covering his eyes with his hand. He understood the legal implications perfectly, even if my mother and sister were still struggling to grasp the total devastation. When the federal government finishes auditing his fake company, I explained clearly, ensuring every single word landed like a physical blow. They are going to demand full restitution for the defrauded investors. They are going to liquidate the Hamptons mansion. They are going to repossess his luxury cars. And when those assets do not cover the millions he stole, they are going to come looking for the rest. They are going to look at his legal spouse. No, Sienna cried, shaking her head violently. I do not have anything. They will take your personal bank accounts, Sienna, I stated flatly. They will take the designer clothes you bought with his credit cards. They will garnish whatever minimum wage wages you eventually earn when you are forced to get a real job. And that massive diamond ring you love shoving in everyone's face. That ring was purchased with stolen investor funds. It belongs to the federal government now. If you try to sell it or hide it, you will be charged with the concealment of stolen assets, and you will be in a federal prison cell right next to your brilliant husband. Sienna let out a guttural scream of pure anguish. She frantically grabbed her left hand, pulling roughly at the diamond ring. It was stuck on her finger. She pulled harder, scratching her own skin until the heavy ring finally slid over her knuckle. She threw it across the boardroom table as if it were literally on fire. The diamond clattered loudly against the polished wood, spinning before coming to a complete stop right in front of my coffee cup. My mother stared at the discarded ring, her entire social universe completely collapsing into dust. She looked at me, her eyes wide and pleading. "Maya," she whispered, her voice broken and hollow. "You cannot just leave us like this. We are your family. We are going to lose everything." "You already lost everything, Helen," I replied, my tone completely devoid of anger or sadness. "You lost it the moment you decided an illusion of wealth was more important than actual human decency. You built your entire life around keeping up appearances and prioritizing the golden child over the daughter who actually worked for a living. Well, the appearances are gone. The golden child is bankrupt, and the daughter you threw away is the only one left standing." I stood up from my heavy leather chair, buttoning my suit jacket with slow, deliberate movements. I looked down at the three people sitting at my boardroom table. They looked incredibly small. They looked pathetic. They were entirely stripped of the unearned arrogance that had defined their personalities for decades. They had absolutely no power here. "Do not look at me for a bailout," I said, looking directly into Sienna's weeping eyes. "I am not writing a check. I am not calling my lawyers. I am not doing a single thing to save you from the consequences of your own terrible decisions. You wanted to sit at the table with the important people. Now you are going to pay the bill for the meal." I turned my back on them and began walking toward the heavy oak doors. I did not feel a single ounce of regret. I only felt the clean, sharp sensation of absolute freedom. I turned my back on them and began walking toward the heavy oak doors. I did not feel a single ounce of regret. I only felt the clean, sharp sensation of absolute freedom. My heels clicked rhythmically against the polished hardwood floor, a steady drumbeat marking the end of a lifetime of emotional servitude. I reached out to grasp the heavy brass handle of the boardroom door, but before I could pull it open, my father's voice stopped me. "Maya, wait!" Richard called out, his tone entirely stripped of its previous aggressive bluster. It was replaced by a smooth, sickeningly sweet desperation that made my stomach physically turn. "Please do not walk out that door. We need to talk about this as a family." I paused, resting my hand on the cool brass handle. I slowly turned around to face them one last time. My parents had moved away from the table. They were walking toward me, their faces rearranged into expressions of deep, profound parental affection. It was a terrifying transformation. Just moments ago, they were furious that I had not handed over $10 million to a criminal. Now they were looking at me as if I were the most precious thing in their entire world. "We were just in shock, Maya," my mother said, stepping forward and reaching her arms out as if she were going to pull me into a warm embrace. "You have to understand how confusing this all was for us. We were lied to. Preston manipulated us just like he manipulated Sienna. But we are so incredibly proud of you, sweetheart. We really are." I took a deliberate step backward, putting myself entirely out of her reach. "Do not touch me, Helen," I warned, my voice dangerously low. My mother dropped her arms, her smile faltering for a brief second before she forced it back into place. "Oh, Maya, please do not be like this. You have achieved so much. You built this massive, beautiful company all by yourself. We always knew you were the smart one. We always knew you were going to be incredibly successful." "Always knew," I repeated, the words tasting like bitter ash in my mouth. "You always knew I was the smart one. Is that why you told me my consulting business was a pathetic hobby? Is that why you drained my bank account to buy a sports car for the sister who just tried to marry her way into wealth? Is that why you shoved me next to the dumpsters on Saturday night? Because you always knew how successful I was." My father stepped up beside my mother, offering a deep, patronizing sigh. "We were hard on you because we wanted to push you to greatness, Maya," he said smoothly, completely rewriting 33 years of history right in front of my eyes. "We knew you had incredible potential. Sienna was always fragile. She needed more guidance. But you were strong. We pushed you because we knew you could handle it. Everything you have built here, it is because of the work ethic we instilled in you. The sheer, unadulterated narcissism required to look at the empire I had built through blood, sweat, and tears and try to claim the credit for it was absolutely staggering. They were actually trying to convince me that their emotional abuse, their blatant favoritism, and their constant belittling were all part of some master parenting strategy to make me a billionaire. They were gaslighting me right to the very end. You did not instill a work ethic in me, Richard. I replied, my voice completely devoid of emotion. You instilled a deep-seated fear of abandonment. I worked 18-hour days because I thought if I was just successful enough, if I just made enough money, you would finally look at me the way you looked at her. I pointed a finger at Sienna, who was still slumped in her chair, staring blankly at the wall, completely catatonic from the shock of her ruined life. But you never did. I continued, my gaze sweeping over my parents' horrified faces. Even when you thought I was just a struggling consultant, you were perfectly happy to let me drain my savings to pay her rent. You were perfectly happy to watch her treat me like garbage, because in your twisted minds, she was the golden child, and I was just the hired help. And you only changed your tune 5 minutes ago when you realized the hired help owns the building. Maya, that is completely unfair, my mother protested, tears welling up in her eyes. Genuine tears this time. Tears for the money and status she was rapidly watching slip through her fingers. We love you. You are our daughter. You do not love me, Helen, I said softly, shaking my head. You love the view from my office. You love the private elevator. You love the idea that you can go back to the country club and brag about your billionaire daughter to cover up the stench of your felon son-in-law. But you do not love me. You do not even know me. My father's jaw tightened, his fake, affectionate smile finally cracking. Do not do this, Maya, he warned, his voice dropping back into its familiar, threatening register. You do not want to cut ties with your family. You will be completely alone. You have all this money, but nobody to share it with. I am already alone, Richard, Far stated flatly. I have been alone in this family since the day I was born. The only difference is that today I am finally choosing to accept it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, pressing the single button that connected directly to my security team downstairs. Yes, Miss Maya, the deep voice of my head of security answered instantly. Send a team up to the primary boardroom, I instructed, keeping my eyes locked onto my parents. I have 3 unauthorized individuals who need to be escorted out of the building, and please ensure their names are permanently added to the absolutely do not admit list at the front desk. Understood, Miss Maya. We are on our way up. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. My mother let out a loud, dramatic sob, grabbing my father's arm. Maya, please, you cannot do this, she wailed. What are we going to do? You are going to walk out to the elevator, I replied, stepping aside and gesturing toward the glass hallway. And you are going to figure out how to pay your own bills for the rest of your lives. The heavy oak doors swung open again and 4 large men in dark suits stepped into the boardroom. They did not say a word. They simply positioned themselves around my parents and Sienna, gesturing toward the exit. My father glared at me, his face twisted with pure hatred. You are going to regret this, he spat, as a security guard placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You are a cold, ruthless bitch. No, I corrected him, a small, genuine smile finally touching my lips. I am the chief executive officer. Have a safe trip back to Atlanta. I watched as the security guards ushered them out of the boardroom. Sienna did not fight. She moved like a sleepwalker, her eyes glazed over, completely broken by the reality of her new life. My mother cried the entire way down the hall, her wails echoing against the glass walls, until the elevator doors finally closed, cutting off the sound completely. I stood alone in the massive, quiet room, breathing in the cool air. The cord was finally cut. 6 months have passed since that morning in the boardroom. The crisp autumn air of late November was sweeping through Washington, replacing the suffocating summer heat. I was standing in the massive gourmet kitchen of my new home, a beautiful sprawling estate in the Virginia countryside. I was not alone. The house was filled with the sounds of genuine laughter, clinking wine glasses, and the rich smell of a massive Thanksgiving feast. But the people sitting around my dining room table were not my blood relatives. They were my chosen family. Sarah, my brilliant chief legal counsel, was there with her husband. David, my chief operating officer, was carving the turkey. There were friends I had made during my grueling climb to the top, mentors who had guided me, and colleagues who respected my mind rather than my bank account. There was absolutely no tension in the air. Nobody was walking on eggshells. Nobody was making passive-aggressive comments about my outfit or my career. For the first time in my 33 years of life, I was experiencing a holiday completely devoid of toxic manipulation. I poured a glass of wine and looked out the window, feeling a profound sense of peace. My company, Apex Holdings, had just closed its most profitable quarter in our entire corporate history. Without the constant draining weight of my family demands dragging me down, my mind was entirely clear, and my business was thriving beyond my wildest expectations. The news cycle surrounding the Sterling family had been absolutely merciless. Preston Sterling did not even make it to a trial. Facing a mountain of irrefutable evidence provided by my firm and the federal government, he quickly accepted a plea deal. He is currently serving a 10-year sentence in a federal penitentiary for wire fraud and corporate embezzlement. The massive tech empire he had bragged about was completely dismantled and liquidated to pay back his furious investors. My parents suffered the exact fate they had always feared the most: total social annihilation. The scandal made the front page of several major business publications, and the local Atlanta gossip circles tore them apart. The prestigious country club they had worshipped promptly revoked their membership, citing a strict morals clause in their charter. Their wealthy friends entirely stopped returning their phone calls. Last month, I received a brief email from my father informing me that they had to quietly sell their house and downsize to a small apartment just to afford the massive legal fees required to keep Sienna out of federal prison. I did not reply to the email. I simply deleted it and went back to my work. They had made their bed by choosing a flashy con artist over their own loyal daughter, and now they were forced to lie in it, completely alone and utterly disgraced. As for Sienna, her descent from the golden child to absolute rock bottom was swift and incredibly brutal. Because she had proudly refused to sign a prenuptial agreement, she was held legally responsible for the massive financial wreckage Preston left behind. The federal agents seized the Hamptons mansion, the luxury cars, the designer wardrobes, and every single piece of jewelry she owned, including that stolen 2-carat diamond ring. Her personal bank accounts were completely drained to pay federal restitution. Today, the sister who once told me to sit by the catering dumpsters because I ruined her wealthy aesthetic is working a minimum wage job at a local chain coffee shop in suburban Atlanta. A former mutual acquaintance recently sent me a picture of her. Sienna was wearing a stained green apron, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail, sweeping the floor behind the counter while customers completely ignored her. She takes the public bus to work every single morning because her car was repossessed. Every Friday, when she gets her meager paycheck, the Internal Revenue Service immediately garnishes 50% of her wages to pay off her outstanding tax liabilities. She has no rich husband, she has no luxury vacations. She has absolutely nothing but the crushing reality of a debt she will likely spend the rest of her natural life paying off. She tried to reach out to me once, calling my corporate office from a blocked number to beg for a small personal loan just to cover her basic electricity bill. I instructed my receptionist to hang up immediately. The boundary I set in that boardroom was permanent and impenetrable. Looking back at the entire ordeal, I do not feel any anger anymore. The burning resentment that fueled me for so many years has completely evaporated, leaving behind a clean, empty space that I have filled with my own genuine happiness. I learned the hardest lesson a person can learn. Family is not always defined by shared DNA or a common last name. Sometimes the people who share your blood are the most dangerous, toxic people in your entire life. They will use your loyalty as a weapon against you, and they will demand your resources while entirely denying you their respect. I had to become the villain in their delusional story in order to become the absolute hero of my own. I chose my peace over their fake approval. I chose my hard-earned empire over their toxic entitlement. And I would make the exact same choice 1,000,000 times over. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. If you have ever felt like the scapegoat in your own family, if you have ever had to build your own table because the people who were supposed to love you refused to give you a seat, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Have you ever had to permanently cut ties with toxic family members to protect your own peace and your own future? How did you find the strength to finally walk away from the guilt and the manipulation? I would absolutely love to hear your experiences and your personal stories in the comments section below. Let us build a community of people who refuse to settle for conditional love. Remember, you do not owe your success or your sanity to people who only value you for what you can provide. Stand your ground, protect your peace, and never let anyone make you feel like you belong next to the trash. Life is simply too short to spend it shrinking yourself to fit into rooms where you are not celebrated. Keep building your empires. Keep protecting your boundaries, and remember that your greatest revenge will always be your own spectacular, undeniable success. You deserve the entire world. Until next time, stay strong and take care of yourselves. One of the most profound lessons embedded within Maya's journey is the realization that biological ties do not inherently grant someone the right to your endless sacrifice. For decades, society has pushed the narrative that blood is thicker than water, conditioning us to believe that family loyalty must be absolute, even at the cost of our own mental, emotional, and financial well-being. Maya's story violently shatters this dangerous illusion. It teaches us that love and respect must be mutual, and when they are replaced by toxic entitlement, setting an impenetrable boundary is not an act of cruelty, it is the ultimate act of self-preservation. Too often, the scapegoats in family dynamics spend their entire lives shrinking themselves, hoping that just one more compromise or one more financial bailout will finally earn them the unconditional love they were denied. But as Maya discovered, transactional love is a bottomless pit. You cannot buy the respect of people who are committed to misunderstanding your worth. The moment she stopped trying to appease her parents and sister, she reclaimed her power. She proved that true success isn't just about accumulating wealth. It is about having the courage to walk away from tables where you are treated as an afterthought. Ultimately, the story illuminates the beautiful reality of chosen families. We are not tethered to the dysfunction we were born into. We possess the autonomy to cultivate a circle of peers, mentors, and friends who celebrate our victories rather than exploiting them. Walking away from toxic relatives allows you to finally breathe, heal, and build an authentic life on your own terms. If you have ever had to make the difficult choice to walk away from a toxic family member to protect your peace, please share your story in the comments below.